Chapter 99. Returning to Wake City, the light saint force within the world essence gathered within Jian Chen and quickly began to heal him. However, Jian Chen's wounds were too serious, so even with the miraculous healing effects of the light saint force, it took a long time for Jian Chen to recover. Controlling the light saint force had taken up a lot of Jian Chen's spirit. After 4 hours, he had used up almost all of his spirit, causing him to stop. Right now, he was suffering from major blood loss as well as a dizzying headache. He was also very exhausted and desired sleep. It was almost as if he hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights and was almost unconscious. After healing himself for 4 hours, his inner body was healed by a little less than half his original strength. His inner organs had been treated by the light saint force, and although it wasn't completely healed, the injured parts had been regrown. All that was left was the fractured bones on his chest that were slightly more troublesome than his organs. Regarding the serious injuries on his chest, the fractured bones had already pierced into his flesh. So whenever Jian Chen moved even the tiniest bit, the wounds on his chest would make Jian Chen feel even more pain. The pain was so intense that the signals his brain was receiving were practically torturing it. Slowly reclining on the grass, he closed his eyes and slowly started to use the rest of his spirit to heal himself. However, Jian Chen had fortunately memorized the entirety of the contents of the Azulite Sword Law, the method of recuperation. With the recuperation method, he could slowly regain his spirit. Jian Chen laid there on the grass for a whole day and night, without moving his body a single time. His eyes had remained closed for just as long. The time quickly passed by as the afternoon approached. The blazing hot rays of the sun were slowly becoming moderately warm as it left the mountains. At that moment, the stone-like Jian Chen finally opened his eyes. After a full day and night of healing, the spirit he had used up was finally replenished. Seeing the color of the sky, Jian Chen didn't hesitate for a moment and began to gather the light saint force. Rapidly, he began to heal his chest once more. As the light saint force entered his chest, pieces of the fractured bones had begun to reattach themselves and heal. For another 4 hours without stopping, Jian Chen's spirit was finally used up once more. However, after 4 hours of healing, Jian Chen's chest was finally fully recovered. However, Jian Chen's spirit wasn't recovered yet and affected his mobility, so Jian Chen sat back down on the grass cross-legged and began to use the recuperation method to recover the lost spirit. Although it wasn't too far from Wake City, but considering that the use of the light saint force was far too conspicuous with its dazzling glow and that healing in Wake City was too inconvenient, no one would be able to detect the light saint force except for Radiant Saint Masters. However, who would be able to guarantee that there was a Radiant Saint Master within the vicinity of Wake City? Radiant Saint Masters were rare within the Tianyuan continent, so many people would fail to find and invite one to help themselves. Jian Chen thought that if he were to reveal his ability to use light saint force like Radiant Saint Masters, then he would get no small amount of glory and would never have to worry about a shortage of monster cores. However, Jian Chen didn't want to reveal that he could mimic the Radiant Saint Master's ability to use light saint force because his intuition told him that if he were to keep it a secret for now, then it would definitely help him out in the future. After 3 full days of continuous healing, Jian Chen's body was finally back to full health. Upon getting up, he immediately left for the official road back to Wake City. The official road was filled with caravans escorted by groups of armed yet blood-soaked mercenaries. Although Jian Chen was a lone traveler, no one paid extra attention to him. Despite his bloody clothes from the wounds he gained, to every single mercenary within the Tianyuan continent, this was a very common sight to see. Practically every mercenary had seen these types of things every day. Walking on the roadway, Jian Chen thought back to the event from 3 days ago, especially the beautiful girl and her naked body that had appeared right in front of him. This was a sight that had left a deep effect on Jian Chen because even in his previous life, he had never had an experience like it before. 3 days ago was the first time he had ever seen the jade-like body of a woman to this extent, and this girl's body was almost as if it belonged to an immortal. However, when Jian Chen had thought about the lady's gigantic strength, his heart still couldn't quite believe it. The girl looked to be 18 years old, 20 years old at the oldest. The age difference between her and Jian Chen was almost non-existent, but to be a great saint master at this age, Jian Chen could only blush with shame at her innate talent. Soon enough, Jian Chen entered Wake City and waited for the city guards to come and inspect him. Since he had the image of an injured and bloody survivor, there was no monetary tax to enter the city. Although the guards were greedy for money, their greed was not without morals. Upon entering Wake City, Jian Chen didn't take a stroll and immediately headed towards an inn. Once he got a room, Jian Chen began to cultivate. Although it had been less than a month ago that he had broken through to become a great saint, his strength was still not strong enough to protect himself within the Tianyuan continent. Not only did the girl from 3 days ago make Jian Chen experience defeat, but she had also made him realize how much strength he needed. After paying for the room, Jian Chen stayed there within the room for 10 days. In those 10 days, Jian Chen hadn't taken a single step out of his room and only used the monster cores in his possession to cultivate. Even for meals he had the inn waitress deliver it straight to his room. After the 10 days had passed, Jian Chen's strength had made huge improvements. Already reaching the middle great saint tier, the saint force within himself was now much stronger than before. Even his saint weapon, the light wind sword, had been upgraded and became even harder than before. With 10 days of cultivation, the Class 3 monster cores Jian Chen had were all but gone, leaving Jian Chen with 2 Class 4 monster cores. Getting off the bed, Jian Chen walked towards the window to look at the sky. Because he had spent so much time cultivating, he was no longer able to distinguish what time it was, and could only rely on the positioning of the sun to get an approximate time. Right outside, the sun was shining brightly without a cloud in the sky for miles. With a huge red flaming ball in the sky emitting strong heat rays, it signified the start of the afternoon. Right now, it should be time to deal with the silver-striped golden snake. I really look forward to the 10,000 immunity, Jian Chen said as he observed the mass of people outside. Chapter 100, 10,000 Immunity, 1. Jian Chen left the inn and went to the fair to buy a few dozen gourds to store water, as well as a cask large enough to fit a person in it. He also replenished his nearly exhausted supply of essentials for everyday life, as well as for living in the wilderness. Another 20 or so pairs of coarse clothing was purchased as well. After storing all of these within his space belt, Jian Chen directly left Wake City and headed toward the wilderness. Jian Chen arrived at a deserted grove and looked around. After confirming there were no people present, he removed a space ring from his space belt and retrieved the silver-striped golden snake from the ring. He then removed the dozens of gourds he had just purchased one by one and neatly placed them on the ground. Jian Chen's heart uncontrollably leapt up to his throat when he saw the arm-thick and nearly 80-meter-long silver-striped golden snake in front of him. A feeling of excitement involuntarily arose from within his heart. After staring at the silver-striped golden snake for a while, Jian Chen took a deep breath to gradually calm himself down. Afterwards, he slowly walked up to the snake, his light wind sword materializing in his hand. Puh! Jian Chen pierced his sword straight into the snake's scarred 7-inch area. Immediately afterwards, fresh red blood gushed out. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen opened one of the gourds as fast as lightning, and placed the opening about as large as a child's fist underneath the snake's body. The gourd directly began to collect that constant flow of blood. Meanwhile, the strong, pungent smell of greasy blood filled the air, and gradually began to diffuse through the air. Smelling that continuously diffusing strong and stinging smell of greasy blood, Jian Chen knit his brows and murmured, "This silver-striped golden snake is indeed worthy of being called a rare and unique beast. I hadn't imagined that the odor of the blood would already be so thick." Jian Chen's tone seemed to be slightly concerned. He was worried that the snake's heavy odor would bring him some kind of trouble. While Jian Chen was extremely anxious, somewhat impatient, and held much anticipation, all of the blood from the snake's body was finally collected after 2 hours. Half of the dozens of gourds that he had bought were already filled. According to Jian Chen's calculations, the total amount of blood he had collected was around 100 kilograms in weight. After carefully sealing the blood-filled gourds, Jian Chen placed them all into his space belt. Afterwards, he once again stored the snake's body into his space belt, and immediately left the area. This silver-striped golden snake's blood's odor had already been diffusing through the air for 2 hours. Although it had become quite faint, Jian Chen still wasn't certain that it wouldn't bring about any mishaps, so the sooner he left, the better. Although Jian Chen knew that perhaps he was worrying a bit too much, for the sake of minimizing danger, he was still willing to go through such inconveniences. Jian Chen returned to Wake City. After resting there for 2 days, and hearing of no special news, he once again left. This time, he didn't return to his original location. Instead, he arrived at the exact opposite location of where he had been previously. After advancing nearly 20 miles down a path, he finally found a desolate and safe area. He then once again removed the silver-striped golden snake from his belt, and began dissecting the body. Although he could have dissected the body within the city, The silver-striped golden snake was, after all, not a normal magical beast. Once its body was dissected, that strong odor of its blood would once again permeate the area. Such a unique scent of blood would definitely attract quite a few experts to investigate. With Jian Chen's current level of strength, he was still unable to go up against the many experts located in Wake City. The dissection of the body went smoothly. Although the defense of the silver-striped golden snake's outer layer of golden snake scales was extremely strong, Jian Chen's current strength had been raised by quite a lot compared to his previous level. Thus, cutting apart the snake scales only required a small amount of strength. Jian Chen carefully removed a thumb-sized blood-red object from the snake's stomach. When he lifted it up to his eye level to examine it closer, he couldn't help but smile and murmur to himself, "So this is the silver-striped golden snake's precious snake gall." The color of the snake's gall was completely different from any other snake's. Normal snake galls had a bluish-green and black color, but this silver-striped golden snake's gall was completely crimson. It looked similar to a red gem. Jian Chen took out a small jade bottle from his space belt and carefully placed the thumb-sized snake gall into the bottle. This snake gall was extremely important. If he wanted to refine the 10,000 immunity pill, then he'd need quite a few snake galls. This body part's importance was much more precious than the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Soon after, the silver-striped golden snake skin had been completely removed by Jian Chen. At the same time, the snake's appearance drastically changed. It now looked like a long. The silver-striped golden snake's most precious parts were its blood and gall. Its other internal organs and its flesh were also worth considerable amounts, but they weren't very useful in Jian Chen's eyes. Afterwards, Jian Chen stored the snake's carcass back into the space ring, intending to proceed with the next steps later. After finishing up the silver-striped golden snake matter, Jian Chen looked around his surroundings. He hesitated for a bit, and looked indecisive as he seemed to stand there and contemplate for a moment. Finally, Jian Chen bit down and retrieved the large cask that he had prepared earlier, and lightly placed it on the ground. He then continued to retrieve all the blood-filled gourds, and proceed to empty them into the cask. Jian Chen now planned to refine the 10,000 immunity. This was because the silver-striped golden snake's blood had too strong of an odor, making it impossible for him to refine it in a city filled with people. Soon after, all the blood within the gourds had been poured into the large cask. The nearly 100 kilograms worth of blood filling majority of the percentile cask. Now the strong stinging smell of blood was emitted from the cask, and circled around the air for a long time without dispersing. Such a large amount of blood collected together made the smell even more dense, and it assaulted Jian Chen's sense of smell, making him almost unable to breathe. Some special magical beast's blood was completely different from a normal magical beast's. The silver-striped golden snake was an example of this. When Jian Chen had drunk the snake's blood to detoxify himself, Jian Chen had completely ignored its extremely greasy smell since he had been completely focused on curing himself. Thus, he hadn't noticed the snake's blood had had such an intolerable heavy odor back then. Chapter 101. 10,000 Immunity. 2. Put on. Jian Chen stripped off all of his clothes, and jumped straight into the blood-filled cask. At the same time, he retrieved the snake gall from within the jade bottle, and directly swallowed it. Not long after the gall entered his stomach, Jian Chen immediately felt a surge of activity from his 5 senses within his body. His stomach began to grumble loudly against his will, as if he was currently having diarrhea. Jian Chen sat cross-legged within the cask. The blood in the cask submerged everything up to his neck, leaving only his head exposed outside. Feeling the ice-cold air emitted from the blood, Jian Chen gradually relaxed. He closed his eyes, and began to absorb the unique genes from within the blood, following the procedure he had read in books. It was because of the existence of these unique elements within the silver-striped golden snake's blood that gave the blood its ability to detoxify poison. According to the books, one must absorb all of these unique elements within the body, and then fuse them into their own blood in order to gain an unpoisonable body. The blood would support the body, and grant one's flesh an overpowering ability to resist poisons. The ability was so powerful that one could even become completely immune to poisons. Once the silver-striped golden snake's blood was used to refine the 10,000 immunity, one would be entirely immune to any poisons weaker than the silver-striped golden snake's. One would even gain the effect of being able to strongly resist poisons at the same level as the silver-striped golden snake's, although one cannot be immune to it. Thus, the amount of danger the poison would be able to inflict would be drastically decreased, or the spread of the poison would be greatly deterred. Although the 10,000 immunity wasn't immune to all the poisons that existed, it was enough to make Jian Chen excited. After all, the silver-striped golden snake's poison had widespread fame on the Tianyuan continent. There were just a handful of poisons more potent than the silver-striped golden snakes. Moreover, such poisons were extremely uncommon, and were as rare to see as the silver-striped golden snake itself. Jian Chen sat cross-legged in the cask with his eyes tightly shut. His stomach continued to loudly grumble extremely loudly. If anyone was standing next to Jian Chen, they would be able to clearly hear the sound. Within Jian Chen's stomach was something similar to a roaring sea. It was very stormy. At the same time, an extremely nauseating feeling arose from Jian Chen's heart, and Jian Chen could barely stop himself from vomiting. I guess the snake's gallbladder is being dissolved. The bile inside is leaking out. Jian Chen resisted the nausea with great difficulty. He inwardly recalled that the books had stated if one wanted to refine the 10,000 immunity, aside from blood, the most important part was the gallbladder. Both the gallbladder and the blood were essential components, because the blood's poison-resistant special elements could only be absorbed into one's body by being drawn in by the gallbladder. These poison-resistant elements weren't like world essence that could be absorbed whenever one wanted to. If one didn't have the appropriate object to draw them in, then even if one had the blood, they wouldn't be able to absorb the elements. Although directly drinking the fresh blood could also detoxify the poison, this could only temporarily address the issue. Not long after, a simple trip to the toilet would drain the consumed blood. There was no way one could even think the way to obtaining an unpoisonable body would be like that. At that moment, a warm current suddenly appeared in Jian Chen's abdomen. The warmth continued to increase, and in that instant, Jian Chen felt like his abdomen was burning, as if a fire was blazing within it. Along with this abrupt uprising of changes within his abdomen, Jian Chen's pores all opened, as if linked together. At the same time, inside of the cask, traces of that bizarre and special energy began to materialize like small fish within the crimson blood. They all began to gradually swim toward Jian Chen and enter his body through his pores. Just as this energy was entering his body, Jian Chen's originally serene expression suddenly changed. The bizarre energy entering him instantly changed from being docile like a small sheep into a ferocious group of tigers. They wildly revolted within Jian Chen's body, making his entire body suffer from intense pain. This is bad. There are unexpectedly some magical beasts' unique berserk elements within this blood. Moreover, it's even stronger than those within a monster core. Sensing his body's changes, Jian Chen instantly understood what was happening. All magical beasts' energies contained berserk elements. This was something that everyone in Tianyuan continent has known for ages. However, these berserk elements were almost all hidden within monster cores, so Jian Chen hadn't expected that they would also exist in the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Moreover, these berserk elements were much more powerful than the ones that he had absorbed from monster cores during cultivation, perhaps even 100-fold stronger. Resisting the powerful pain arising from his body with much difficulty, an extremely baffled thought popped up in Jian Chen's mind. How come I hadn't felt these berserk elements at all when I first drank the silver-striped golden snake's blood? Jian Chen sat in the cask, his body beginning to shake as his entire body down to even his pores were in intense pain, and the muscles on Jian Chen's couldn't help but twitch. His originally flush face had gradually begun to turn pale. The traces of the bizarre and special energy within the snake's blood seemed to be attracted by something, and continuously rushed into Jian Chen's pores. As the amount of energy in his body continued to increase, the berserk elements contained within also increased, and became more and more powerful. The pain brought forth onto his body by these berserk elements made Jian Chen sweat profusely. However, he clenched his teeth and fists tightly, and continued to resist it. At that moment, the azure and violet glows in Jian Chen's dantian suddenly emitted faint light rays. Meanwhile, the fierce pain Jian Chen was feeling suddenly disappeared without a trace. The berserk elements absorbed by him that had accompanied the bizarre energy within the blood seemed to have been attracted by some strange force. As soon as they entered Jian Chen's body, they immediately began to fly towards the azure and violet glows in his dantian. For a while, Jian Chen was a bit at loss at the sudden changes. However, he soon realized what had happened, and immediately sighed in relief. He knew that every time he absorbed energy from monster cores, the berserk elements contained would also be ingested by the azure and violet glows in his dantian. Therefore, there was nothing strange about what had just happened. Without the torment of the berserk elements, Jian Chen's previously pained expression immediately loosened. However, he still didn't relax from this, and immediately surveyed the current situation his inner body was in. The only thing he could sense was the special elements. The berserk elements within the snake's blood had been completely absorbed by the azure and violet glows in his dantian upon entering his body. There were only some harmless special elements remaining, and they were gradually gathering in the direction of where the snake's gallbladder was. Eventually, they completely surrounded the gallbladder. The absorption of these special elements was extremely slow. Jian Chen stayed in the cask for an entire day and night before he was finally able to finish absorbing all of the special elements in the blood. Currently, the snake's gallbladder in Jian Chen's stomach had already gathered all of the special elements and formed a thick layer. After a day and night of absorbing all of the elements within the blood in the cask not only lost all of its color and luster, even the intolerable smell of it had disappeared without a trace. Right now, there was only one step remaining until Jian Chen could refine the 10,000 immunity. This step was also the most important one. Whether or not he would be successful completely depended on this step. Chapter 102. 10,000 Immunity, 3. Right now, there was only one step remaining until Jian Chen could refine the 10,000 immunity. This step was also the most important one. Whether or not he would be successful completely depended on this step. By this point, all of the most important parts of the silver-striped golden snake's blood had been cleanly gathered by Jian Chen and concentrated in the gallbladder to form a strange substance. The strange substance was the anti-venom and the blood of the silver-striped golden snake combined together. In accordance to the contents of the books, Jian Chen needed to absorb the anti-venom and blood substance into his own body. And once he had completely assimilated it into his body, only then would he successfully gain the 10,000 immunity. As long as the substance was absorbed into the body, then Jian Chen's blood would take on a detoxifying property. Not only that, but the body would undergo changes as the blood circulated around the body. After some time, the body would become resistant to poison and grow an immunity to weaker poisons without fear of harm. With a heavy expression, Jian Chen stood up. This was the final step as well as the most crucial one because the anti-venom substance would only gather within his body if the gallbladder of the snake was present. If there was no gallbladder, then the substance would dissipate uselessly. Before he could digest the snake's gallbladder, he would need to assimilate the anti-venom within his bloodstream. Jian Chen calmed himself down and began to control the substance around his body. However, as the substance left the gallbladder, a strange attraction started to happen and began to pull at the substance Jian Chen was trying to control. Jian Chen bit his lips as he increased the amount of focus he was putting in his control. Although Jian Chen's strength was still quite weak, his spirit was unquestionably strong. Under his increased control, the strange substance had finally left the gallbladder and assimilated into his bloodstream. However, just as he was assimilating the bloodstream, the strange substance completely separated from the blood, like two opposite poles of a magnet. The two seemed incompatible with each other, and there was no way they could possibly fuse. However, Jian Chen still wasn't discouraged. He once again focused his strength on controlling the strange substance to forcefully merge with the bloodstream. He then watched it from the side. If the strange substance showed the slightest indication of separating again, he would immediately pour all his focus onto it and force it back into the bloodstream. As the blood flowed throughout his veins, the substance which Jian Chen had forcefully absorbed into his blood was finally completely assimilated. Surprisingly, a part of the substance had a green tint to its color, but in the end that had also been absorbed into the blood and disappeared. As the energy from the substance was absorbed into his bloodstream, Jian Chen felt that his blood had somehow gotten weaker, as if something else had happened. After a portion of the energy from the substance was assimilated, Jian Chen didn't know how much time had passed, but the gallbladder he had digested had shrunk a bit. Jian Chen knew that the gallbladder wouldn't be able to survive in his body for long. So without a moment of hesitation, Jian Chen had forcefully broken a part of the substance away, and began to try to assimilate it into his bloodstream one more time. Time after time, Jian Chen had tried again for an unknown amount of time. But in the end, the very last of the substance had successfully been assimilated into his bloodstream, as the gallbladder was on the brink of disappearing. Feeling the noticeable change in his bloodstream, Jian Chen let out a sigh of relief. His heart grew excited as a bright smile took over his face. The 10,000 immunity. I never thought I would gain the unpoisonable body. Jian Chen said inwardly. From his past 20 years of experience, he knew that this new world he was in was even more dangerous, so the 10,000 immunity would bring him a great amount of benefits. At the very least, if he was to be captured by his enemies, He wouldn't have to worry about poisoned food. However, while Jian Chen had successfully refined the 10,000 immunity, it was still in its primary stage and not its perfect stage. While his blood had fused with the anti-venom from the blood of the silver-striped golden snake, this fusion was not yet complete and would need some time before it would reach perfection. Once his blood and the anti-venom had perfectly fused together, it would then circulate around his body endlessly and transform the bones, flesh and organs within his body. Every part of his body would gain the anti-venom capability. This would be the true extent of the 10,000 immunity. Slowly, Jian Chen opened his eyes to the first rays of light. In the horizons, the fiery sun was just peeking out, meaning that it was only the start of the morning. Jian Chen leapt out from the blood-filled cask and took out a towel from his space belt to clean off the blood on him before wearing a new set of clothes. After all that time Jian Chen had spent in the cask, the blood within had already been reduced by a quarter. Even the previously bloody smell had dissipated and the color of the blood had started to darken a bit. Looking at the cask beside him, Jian Chen kicked at the container firmly. The cask overturned and broke on the hard ground, spilling the blood onto the ground. While the blood of the silver-striped golden snake was incomparably precious, the most important part of the blood had already been absorbed by him. The remaining parts of the blood could only be said to be equal to water, and did not have a single use for it anymore. After returning to Wake City once more, Jian Chen entered a restaurant and ordered a few dishes to eat his fill. After a day and night of not eating, Jian Chen's stomach was a bit hungry. Right now was the busiest time for the restaurant. The environment inside was already very lively. The people coming and going was like an endless stream and filled up the tables in a flash. Even the waitresses of the restaurant were constantly scampering around busily taking orders and delivering dishes. Little brother, the seats here are all occupied already. Could I possibly sit here with you? Chapter 103. Flame Mercenaries highlight above for title Little brother, the seats here are all occupied already. Could I possibly sit here with you? At that moment, a deep-sounding voice came from behind Jian Chen. Turning his head to look at the source, Jian Chen saw a middle-aged man with a big smile on his face. He stood across on the opposite side of Jian Chen and stared at him with a good-natured look. The middle-aged man looked to be around 40 years old and wore a cyan-colored robe. However, to Jian Chen's sharp eyes, this robe was made of coarse material and so was categorized as a cheap cloth. With his short black hair, there was nothing about him that stood out. Even his good-natured smile wasn't a fake one. Jian Chen nodded his head with a smile. Since the restaurant has suddenly filled up, I can't possibly use up all this room by myself. Come and sit with me. Then, many thanks, little brother. The other man laughed as he cupped his hands together. Then he pulled out the stool and sat down on it. Miss, a cup of wine and a pound of your finest horse meat. The man called out. Okay. Please wait a moment, honored customer. The waitress called back. Jian Chen stared at the middle-aged man in front of him for a while before finally tearing his eyes off of him and looking back at his own meal. The middle-aged man looked at Jian Chen and chuckled. And what should I call this younger brother? Jian Chen. He responded with a mouthful of meat, so the words did not come out as audibly. Jian Chen. Heh, what a pleasant name. The middle-aged man sized up Jian Chen with his eyes and then opened his mouth to ask, Brother Jian Chen, I'm assuming you are a mercenary as well. He nodded his head. Correct, but because my strength is quite low, I am only one of the lowest of D-ranked mercenaries. A mercenary's rank corresponded with their strength and their merits from missions done. The lowest of the D-ranked mercenaries were generally newbie saints. However, there were a few cultivators that did not yet condense their saint weapons amongst the D-ranked mercenaries. Even though the middle-aged man looked to be quite well-natured, Jian Chen didn't dare to reveal his precise strength to him. The man laughed with no ill intentions. Little brother, you can't be any older than 20 years old. Once you've successfully condensed your saint force into a saint weapon, then your potential will be unlimited. The man's words were sincere, but after he spoke, he gave a long sigh. Thinking back, I was 25 years old when I first condensed my saint weapon and broke through to become a saint. To think little brother here is only 20 years old and is a saint. I don't think it'll be too far off until there will be another gifted Earth Saint Master in the future. When the 3 words Earth Saint Master were said, the man's face had looked almost expectant. Hearing that, Jian Chen couldn't help but look at the middle-aged man once more. While he had a better impression of this man, it was still nothing more than just that. Condensing a saint weapon at the age of 25 could be said to be quite mediocre within the Tianyuan continent. This type of person would be limited to being a great Saint Master at the best, and without coming across an opportunity, they would never be able to break through to become an Earth Saint Master. After all, in the space between a great Saint Master and an Earth Saint Master was an unbelievably difficult threshold. This threshold is so difficult that condensing a saint weapon was easier by 100,000 times. This is because from the breakthrough to an Earth Saint Master from a great Saint Master, if one was not careful, they would fall in a land without redemption. In a less severe case, they would suffer a serious injury and lose their entire cultivation, thus becoming a cripple. In the worst-case scenario, they would forfeit their lives to the Yellow Springs. TL note: https://en Wikipedia.org/wiki/du. The Chinese version of hell, equivalent to Yomi of Japanese mythology. The threshold separating the Earth Saint Master from the Great Saint Master was one dividing life from death. There were many people with mediocre talent that reached the Great Saint Master but were unable to break through to become an Earth Saint Master. Many more had even died trying to make the breakthrough. The success rate of breaking through to become an Earth Saint Master was only 1%. Regarding this bit of information, Jian Chen had known about it. Whether or not it was in the Kargath Library or the Chongyang Mansion Library, Jian Chen had read about it. "Little brother, I am guessing you haven't joined a mercenary group yet?" The middle-aged man asked Jian Chen with a small smile. Hearing this, Jian Chen's heart jumped as he realized what the man was about to say, but he nodded his head in response. "That is correct. Little brother, why don't you join my flame mercenaries? Although the amount of people within our group isn't large, the mercenaries in here are quite good-natured," he said eagerly. Jian Chen became silent as he listened to the man. He had never thought about joining a mercenary group before, since in his mind, joining a mercenary group was only a burden that would limit his free-roaming spirit. It would also bring his cultivation rate to a standstill since the only way he could cultivate rapidly was to use monster cores. Monster cores were absolutely necessary, and so the amount needed was also enormous. If he were to go into the magical beast mountain range by himself, the profits he earned would naturally be his and keep up with his consumption rate. However, if he were to join the mercenary group, it would be easier to kill magical beasts at the cost of splitting up the amount of monster cores with the entire group, which would be a problem. If Jian Chen were to join a mercenary group, he needed to go solo. Otherwise, the monster core distribution would be given to other people as well. Seeing Jian Chen's silence, the middle-aged man didn't give up. "Brother Jian Chen, my flame mercenaries is only a small-sized group that doesn't restrict the actions of anyone like they do in the larger groups. With so many different types of rules and restrictions that makes one's head want to explode, our group is not like that. Joining my mercenary group is merely helping the group have an easier way to earn money. You must know that the magical beast mountain range is a profitable way of earning money, and that monster cores sell for a high price while helping us cultivate our saint force, which is extremely essential. Even the parts of a magical beast can be sold for a high price to any of the restaurants. As our numbers increase, then so does our strength. Even if we come across a high-leveled magical beast, we would be able to kill it. Just think. If we are able to kill a high-leveled magical beast, imagine how large our profits would be. Even your heart would consider this, I bet." The man stopped momentarily to breath before continuing. "If you are by yourself, even if you can deal with a few low-leveled magical beasts, then it would not sell for much money, I'm sure. Even if you spend so much energy killing it, the amount of money earned would not even cover your healing costs. And if you come across an ambush from a few high-leveled magical beasts, how long do you think a single person could run away from a dozen high-leveled magical beasts? This is definitely impossible, and in the end, that person would only be throwing his life away." Seeing how Jian Chen was still silent, the man gave it another try. "Brother Jian Chen, if it's concerning the matter of distribution of benefits, you don't have to worry. While our flame mercenaries was recently established a few years ago, the brothers within the group are made of steel who care for the bonds of friendship over the metal of money. In the case that our group has a profit, then no matter if you worked hard or not, the group will not treat you unfairly." Chapter 104. Joining a mercenary group. Highlight above for title. Seeing how Jian Chen was still silent, the man gave it another try. "Brother Jian Chen, if it's concerning the matter of distribution of benefits, you don't have to worry. While our flame mercenaries was recently established a few years ago, the brothers within the group are made of steel who care for the bonds of friendship over the metal of money. In the case that our group has a profit, then no matter if you worked hard or not, the group will not treat you unfairly." With that said, the middle-aged man had stopped talking. He had said all that needed to be. The only thing left was to see what choice Jian Chen would make. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed in thought as he considered the benefits within his head. Finally biting his lip, his eyes shone with a firm decision. All right then, I'll join your group. However, I have some conditions. I will not have any type of restriction put onto me, neither will I have to obey anyone. Also, if I want to leave the group in the future, the group will not try to stop me in any way. The middle-aged man looked at Jian Chen with doubt. Brother Jian Chen, could it be you're not going to even ask about how strong the flame mercenaries are or if there are any strong enemies? You have to realize, if our flame mercenaries have a strong enemy and you join, then it will definitely bring you trouble as well and may very well be a concern to your life. Jian Chen laughed gently as he said, if things like this were too frightening, then why did I bother to leave my home to explore the world? If I have decided to join your mercenary group, then a factor like this was not even in my range of thinking. The middle-aged man began to laugh without restraint. Good. Brother Jian Chen, I really can't take your age seriously. You're quite the brave person. The conditions you asked for won't be of any problem since our group is a small one whose only goal is to earn money. The mercenaries in our group won't try to restrict you either. If you want to leave the group, you're free to do so at any time. This couldn't be any better. Jian Chen nodded his head. The middle-aged man nodded as well. We've talked for quite some time and I didn't even introduce myself yet. My name is Kendall, captain of the Flame Mercenaries. Brother Jian Chen, if you don't mind, then call me Uncle Kendall. Whatever titles people give to the captains, I care not for it. Kendall laughed. All right, then in the future I'll call you Uncle Kendall. In Jian Chen's eyes, Kendall was someone he had a good impression of, and seemed to be quite honest and dependable now. Soon after, Kendall and Jian Chen both finished their food and left the restaurant together to go to the mercenary union to take care of the formality procedure. Joining a mercenary group was relatively simple. So in a flash, Jian Chen had taken care of the entire procedure and became an official member of the Flame Mercenaries. Jian Chen, let's go. I'll take you to the temporary meeting spot and introduce you to the other members. Kendall began to walk on the road as they both left the mercenary union. On the way, Kendall began to explain a few things about the Flame Mercenaries, allowing Jian Chen to gain a better understanding. The Flame Mercenaries were established 5 years ago as a small mercenary group. Soon after they were established, the members had spent the majority of their time in the magical beast forest killing magical beasts for money. Very rarely did they accomplish any missions, so for that reason, they remained to be a D-ranked group without having a single chance to prove their strength. Including Kendall, there were 9 other members within the group, so including Jian Chen, the Flame Mercenaries now had 10 members in total. According to Kendall, in those 8 members, aside from himself being at the primary Saint Master stage, 5 members were at the Great Saint stage while the remaining 3 were only at the Saint level. After he said that, Kendall slapped his forehead as he turned to Jian Chen with a smile. That's right, brother Jian Chen, I still don't know what type of strength you possess right now. Although Kendall's heart could only guess that Jian Chen was only at the Saint level due to his young age, but this was only a guess. Until he got a straight answer from Jian Chen, he didn't dare to make a rash conclusion. With a small chuckle, Jian Chen took out the badge representing him as a mercenary from his space belt. This mercenary badge was given to Jian Chen when he first became one, proving that he was a D-ranked mercenary. Seeing the badge, Kendall's face didn't change at all. Then our Flame Mercenaries have just added another saint to our ranks. With this increase in strength, hunting magical beasts will be that much easier. Jian Chen walked with Kendall for about the time it took for an oil lamp to burn out before finally arriving at an ordinary-looking house with broken cobblestone steps leading to it. The house was not very big, and the eaves of the house had plenty of cobwebs hanging about it. Even the walls had many scars from the passage of time and nature. It was clear to see that this house had been in existence in Xueqi City for many years, but no one had taken care of it. Kendall walked up to the door of the house and lightly knocked on it. Not too long after, the wooden door opened slightly to reveal the dark-skinned head of a person. Judging from his skinny face, the youth looked to be around 26 years old and looked like the type of person to be a snatcher if put within a group of people. Upon seeing Kendall, the youth's face revealed a smile as he said, Uncle Kendall, I just knew it was you. Soon after, Jian Chen followed Kendall into the room. While the light within the house was dusky, it did not affect Jian Chen's vision at all. As Jian Chen looked around the house, he began to take in the sight in its entirety. The house from the inside wasn't too big, and the layout wasn't complicated at all. Aside from a few plank beds, there was a single long table along with a few stools. In fact, the room's layout could even be said to be quite crude. On top of the plank beds were a few bored people lazing about with a bottle of wine in their hands. However, when Captain Kendall entered the room, everyone immediately stared at him and started to gather around him. Gather around, everyone. Let me introduce you all to Brother Jian Chen. He has just recently joined our flame mercenaries, and is the youngest out of all the people in our group. Starting today, I hope everyone can take care of him. As soon as he entered the room, Kendall had pulled Jian Chen along to introduce him. At this, Jian Chen knew he had to say something. Standing with his feet together and cupping his hands in a salute towards everyone, he smiled. I am a newcomer here. I hope that everyone will help keep an eye on me. Chapter 105. Team Operation. Everyone in the room turned their gazes away from Kendall to Jian Chen, but the moment they saw his young face, everyone was astonished. However, Jian Chen's words had a flattering effect on them. He needed to make a good impression since first impressions were very important when meeting new people. Brother Jian Chen. Your name is Jian Chen, right? Come and sit down quickly. No matter how young you are, the moment you join our group, you are our brother to enjoy blessings and endure misfortune together with. In the future, if you find someone that is bullying you, come and find me. A tall but sturdy person spoke as he got up from the bed. Crossing over to Jian Chen, he placed his right hand on his shoulder and then pushing him towards the table to sit at. Jian Chen smiled. This one doesn't know how to call his older brother. Looking at the man, Jian Chen thought him to be quite sturdy with his muscles protruding out noticeably. From his stature and physique, the man looked to be in his 30s, and even in the dark room, Jian Chen could tell that this man was relatively dark-skinned to the point of resembling a black person. His entire body was filled with scars and old injuries that seemed to have originated from magical beasts. Just one look at him and Jian Chen could tell that the man was quite experienced with dealing with magical beasts. I'm called Hu Pa. Brother Jian Chen, if you don't mind, feel free to call me Big Brother Hu Pa in the future. Since I'm older than you, it's not going to be all that bad anyways. He sat by Jian Chen's side and poured him a glass of water with a big smile. All right then, in the future I'll call you Brother Hu Pa. Jian Chen laughed. At that point, the people who were previously drinking in the middle of the room stood up as well. Brother Jian Chen, let me introduce you to everyone. Kendall pointed his fingers at a few of the people around them. Excluding Jian Chen and Kendall, there was another 6 male mercenaries. Their age ranged around 30 to 40 years old, and there were even 2 twins in the small group named Zhou Dekai and Zhou Shaokai who were both 28 years old. The both of them had the power of a great saint and had the same exact facial features. If it were not for the fact one of them had a scar over their forehead, then it would have been extremely difficult to tell which one of the twins was the older twin and which was the younger twin. The other 4 people were 32 years old, and aside from the primary great saint Hu Pa, the other 3 people were called Yun Xian, Xiao Dao, and Chong Ning Feng. Yun Xian was relatively tall with a wisely face that made him look like a scholar. At the age of 25, he possessed the strength of a middle saint. Xiao Dao on the other hand was tiny, and with his skinny body, he almost looked like a skeleton. In comparison to Yun Xian, Xiao Dao was seemingly weaker than him. Aside from Jian Chen, Xiao Dao was the youngest of the bunch at the age of 22 years old who also had the strength of a middle saint. Chong Ning Feng was a middle-aged man with a calm composure. At the age of 30, Ning Feng was 2 years older than Hu Pa and was a middle great saint. Jian Chen, this is our flame mercenaries group. Aside from the people here, there are another 2 people at the market buying items, but I'm sure they'll be back soon. Kendall said. Tomorrow will be another operation for the flame mercenaries where everyone will be participating in. Brother Jian Chen, are you willing to join us? There aren't many rules, but if you don't want to join, then no one will try to force you. This is a voluntary event. Operation? What type of operation? Jian Chen blinked curiously. Kendall gave an incredulous stare at Jian Chen before downing the wine in the cup from the table. What other type of operation is there? We're going to go to the Magical Beast Mountain Range to hunt for magical beasts. After all, our flame mercenaries was created for those who wanted to group together to hunt for magical beasts. With our current strength, selling the monster cores are all that we can do to earn money. Then of course I'll go. What other reason do I need to go to the Magical Beast Mountain Range? Jian Chen chuckled as he replied. Brother Jian Chen, you don't need to worry. Although you've a weaker strength than us, our combined profits won't exclude you in any way. If your contributions are enough, then you'll get your fair share in accordance to the distribution. Jian Chen, the magical beast mountain range is very evil and is filled with hidden dangers. In the case that we come across a Class 3 magical beast that the captain and your older brothers cannot handle, then it is very possible that your life will be lost. So Jian Chen, take your time and think about if you really want to go or not. The speaker this time was the youngest person aside from Jian Chen, Xiao Dao. His shining eyes stared at Jian Chen with a sincere expression. From his voice, a serious tone could be heard, warning Jian Chen of the dangers with a heartfelt message. Hearing Xiao Dao speak, everyone in the room grew even more solemn. A Class 3 magical beast was enough to bring about a huge amount of pressure. Even though Captain Kendall had the strength of a primary Saint Master, but when it came to a Class 3 magical beast, he would only be able to protect himself. It was oftenly seen that a magical beast was stronger than its same-level human counterpart. On the Tianyuan continent, if one wanted to go hunt for magical beasts at the same level as them, they wouldn't stand a chance against the strong magical beasts without a strong cultivation or battle skill. This was practically an impossible task unless one had an attributed saint force. Otherwise, it was better to run away to preserve your own life. And even though Captain Kendall was a primary Saint Master, his Saint Force didn't have an attribute, so his attacks would be far weaker than those with an attribute. Against a regular Class 3 magical beast, while he could fight it, it was only to protect himself. If he were to come across a stronger or faster Class 3 magical beast, then even Captain Kendall would be hard-pressed to escape with his life, and most likely end up as a type of cuisine for the magical beasts to enjoy. But no one in the room would have expected that the moment Jian Chen heard the words Class 3 magical beast, there would be disdain in his eyes. The moment he had become a primary great saint, he had already started to hunt and kill Class 3 magical beasts by himself. It could be said that the regular Class 3 magical beasts posed no threat to Jian Chen at all other than the silver-striped golden snake. By this point in time, Jian Chen's strength was already at the middle great saint level, which was even stronger than a primary great saint many times over. Don't worry everyone, my strength isn't all that weak. After going to the magical beast mountain range once in the past, I've learned many things in there. Jian Chen said. Chapter 106. The Peculiar Dantian. Following that, Jian Chen and the Flame Mercenaries began to talk about the many interesting things they had heard about while traveling through the Tianyuan continent. As they talked, Jian Chen and the Flame Mercenaries had subconsciously grown closer and became friendlier. But what was worth mentioning was that every single one of the members of the Flame Mercenaries were straightforward with their words, Captain Kendall included. All of them were quite emotional, and even though Jian Chen had revealed that he was a D-ranked mercenary, not a single one of them had held him in contempt or treated him badly. On this continent where power was the ultimate ruling power, people like this were extremely rare. And thus, Jian Chen's impression of the Flame Mercenaries had grown quickly. Unaware of the passage of time, the afternoon glow quickly came in as a knock on the door alerted everyone on the inside of visitors. That's definitely Kobolds who is knocking. Hearing the knock, Xiao Dao revealed a happy smile as he went to open the door. As Jian Chen watched the door open, he wondered what the remaining two people of the Flame Mercenaries were like. The door opened as two plain-clothed people walked into the room. The first person looked to be around 30 years old with a relatively built stature that matched Jian Chen's own physique and eyes that shone just as bright. The one following behind was a person who resembled someone around Captain Kendall's age. While his face was rather ordinary-looking, the shine in his eyes were anything but ordinary. Kobolds, dear, you two finally came back. Captain Kendall laughed. Come, let me introduce you to Jian Chen here, who just recently joined our Flame Mercenaries. From this point on we are all brothers here, so it is important that we pay attention to one another. Kendall then turned to look at Jian Chen. Brother Jian Chen, the younger person is called Kobolds. Not only is he quite strong, but he is the most intelligent person within our Flame Mercenaries. Whatever action we considered on doing was suggested by Kobolds. The person next to him is Deer, who is similarly the strongest mercenary within our group after me, who is at the peak level Great Saint. I believe that in 3 years, he will make a breakthrough and become a Saint Master. Jian Chen cupped his hands in salute towards Kobolds and Deer as a sign of greeting and respect. Jian Chen, just by looking at you, I'm guessing you're around 20 years old, so I'm not quite sure how strong you are exactly. Kobold stared at Jian Chen with a calculative look and a curious tone. Jian Chen merely laughed without saying anything more before taking out his mercenary badge from within his space belt. It wasn't too long ago that I became a D-ranked mercenary.
Oh.
Kobolds nodded his head as he continued to stare at Jian Chen, his eyes revealing the curious glint that shone brightly. Then, he took his space belt and handed it towards Kendall. Uncle Kendall, I've already prepared everything we'll need for the operation tomorrow. Taking the space belt from Kobolds, Kendall said, That's good. Then now that all the preparations for the trip is done, we will set out tomorrow morning. This time, we'll definitely hunt plenty of magical beasts. Brother Jian Chen, do you have any complaints?
None. I will listen to Uncle Kendall.
Jian Chen laughed. All right, then everybody should rest up for today. Tomorrow will be another day to go all out. Leaving the house afterwards, Jian Chen began to stroll around Wake City by himself. In regards to the operation tomorrow, Jian Chen didn't care at all for it because with the flame mercenaries' strength, if they didn't want to die straight away, then they would first go hunt for Class 2 magical beasts. Although the flame mercenaries had 1 Saint Master and 4 Great Saints, they weren't able to compete with a Class 3 magical beast without trouble. So the flame mercenaries had no choice but to hunt for Class 2 magical beasts for now. But in Jian Chen's case, it could even be said that there was nothing that could pose a threat to him but a Class 4 magical beast. Even if he were to come across a Class 4 magical beast he couldn't beat, Jian Chen was confident in his ability to run away at the very least. Because of these reasons, Jian Chen did not feel any type of pressure on him about tomorrow's operation. After he had talked with the other mercenaries about what other supplies he would need, Jian Chen had already collected the majority of them and continued to stroll around Wake City. It had been over a month since Jian Chen had first come to Wake City, but the majority of his time was spent in the magical Beast Mountain range. He had only spent a few days inside a room, and even then, almost all of that time was spent cultivating. He didn't have any time to himself yet, so Jian Chen had wanted to take advantage of this free period to take a break. Even though Wake City wasn't an immensely huge city, it was still large in its own right. Even with its expansive iron wall that encircled the city, a person would be able to reach the west side from the east if they walked fast enough in a single day. Because of its close proximity to the magical Beast Mountain range, the borders of the city was always lively, so a third of the lands in Wake City were owned by restaurants and private personnel. Jian Chen continued to slowly stroll down the street and look at the many street vendors by the side. Many of these vendors were mercenaries. Only a few of them were actual merchants. These stalls would hold many items, including herbal medicine, monster cores, and even toys for children. Yet, the majority of the monster cores sold here were Class 1 ones, with Class 2 cores rarely showing up. Because of this, Jian Chen did not have much of an interest in this. There were many magical beasts within the continent, but if a mercenary were to sell a monster core through a merchant they would only get 70% of market price. Because of this, many mercenaries would rather sell the items themselves since monster cores were always in high demand on the Tianyuan continent anyways. Even then, many people would still hire mercenaries to go and kill magical beasts instead of going themselves. As Jian Chen enjoyed his leisurely walk, the azure and violet glow within his dantian began to pulse so wildly that it began to impact both his dantian and his body. Before, his dantian was like a still lake with not even a single ripple, but now, the lake had become a raging sea with waves threatening to drown anything in its path. Even with the use of his Saint Force, Jian Chen was unable to control this storm. Jian Chen's face changed as he realized that the azure and violet glow was no longer controllable. This was the worst-case scenario Jian Chen was afraid of. Although the two glows would generally float around within his dantian and take the majority of the energy within the monster cores, Jian Chen knew that sooner or later, these two glows would bring about a huge amount of trouble for him. And it seems that today was finally the day that the azure and violet glow would no longer stay peacefully within him. Chapter 107. The strange white stone within Jian Chen's dantian. The azure and violet glows were constantly flickering as they revolved around each other in a circle and emitted a bright light that could be seen by the naked eye. At the same time, he felt a strange sensation within his head as the azure and violet glows started to move as if they had a will of their own and possessed their own independent mind and life. To Jian Chen, it was almost as if the two glows were in a joyous mood. That's right, the feeling Jian Chen had felt was as if the azure and violet glows in his dantian were experiencing a great amount of joy and excitement. But Jian Chen was dumbfounded by this unbelievable conclusion. Even the look on Jian Chen's face could show the amount of disbelief he had. At the same time, another strange sensation entered Jian Chen's mind as if it came in out of thin air. From this sensation, Jian Chen realized that the two glows in his dantian had established some sort of subtle connection with an unknown thing. It was akin to a spiritual connection, but simultaneously, it also felt as if something was being locked away. Trying to restrain his emotions, Jian Chen took a deep breath and slowly turned his head towards where the sensation was at its strongest. His eyes landed upon a street stall, where a 30-year-old man was managing. In his stall was a pile of Class 1 monster cores and a few fantastic yet bizarre items. Jian Chen's eyes swept past the items one by one until it landed upon a fist-sized white stone. It was in a particularly peculiar shape and was completely white, but other than that, it was unremarkable. Compared to other white stones, this one didn't seem to be any different. Thanks to the unfathomable mystery that was the strange sensation, Jian Chen knew that it was this white stone that was causing such a stir within his dantian. The glows had some sort of a connection with this locked white stone, like a child would try to protect his most favorite treasure. The feeling of happiness was so strong. Even Jian Chen was experiencing the sensation to a degree. On the surface, Jian Chen's expression didn't change at all, but the moment he reached the street stall, his hand reached out to grab the fist-sized white stone. But the moment his hand was about to pick it up, his face changed and let loose a surprised expression. It was because this fist-sized white stone was surprisingly heavy. The moment his hand made contact with it, the white stone did not move even a single centimeter. What a heavy stone! Jian Chen couldn't help but to exclaim. Using his entire hand to clasp the stone firmly into his hand, he began to exert even more energy, and finally, the stone began to slowly rise from the table. Honored customer, are you looking at this strange stone? The stall owner suddenly appeared next to Jian Chen with a smile. Jian Chen slowly brought the fist-sized stone to his attention and stared at it. While it was only the size of a fist, it had already reached a weight of over 50 kilograms. If it were not for the fact that Jian Chen was a middle-grade saint, picking up this stone in one hand would have been a strenuous task. But when he picked up the strange white stone, he could clearly sense the excitement and happiness emanating from within his dantian. However, Jian Chen was skeptical of this sensation because only beings that were given life would be able to experience these types of emotions. And yet, the two glows within his dantian were clearly giving off the sensation. So could it be that the azure and violet glow in his dantian actually had self-awareness? Perhaps they already had the ability to think for themselves. When Jian Chen reached this line of thought, his entire body shook and his forehead began to drip with sweat as he began to feel like he had no control over his fate now. He couldn't help but sigh as he thought about his dantian problem. There was truly no way out of this problem. He had no idea or method in regards to the two glows in his dantian as they were out of his control. Even if Jian Chen wanted those two glows gone from his dantian, there would be no way for him to accomplish it. AI, this is a blessing, not a curse, but also a curse I cannot escape from. It's best to forget about it since I've died once before. What else is there to care about? At worst, I'll just die again. Jian Chen said to himself. Continuing to look at the white stone in his hand, he thought about his dantian even more. The texture of this white stone was exceptionally unique. No matter how much Jian Chen looked at it, he wasn't able to tell if it was made out of stone or fine iron, as not only was it heavy, but its density was beyond normal. Sending his internal saint force through his arm, Jian Chen tried to have it enter the white stone, only to feel a strong resistance the moment the saint force made contact with it. It was as if the white stone was a defensive fort, and his saint force, the invader, wasn't able to make a dent in its defenses. The density of the white stone was extremely high, to the point that even Jian Chen was unable to use his saint force to enter it. Jian Chen tore his eyes away from the white stone and looked at the stall owner and asked, I don't know what kind of stone this is, but what uses are there for it? Hearing Jian Chen's question, the stall owner laughed in an embarrassed way. Honored customer, to be truthful, even I don't know what this white stone is. Whatever it is used for, I don't know the answer to that either. But it is unusually heavy, so just after one look at it, one can tell that this white stone is no ordinary plaything. Then where did you find such a thing like this? Jian Chen's eyes shone as he continued to ask. Furrowing his eyebrows, the stall owner began to ponder the question before saying, Honored customer, I've been asked that same question many times, but I've never told them. However, you seem quite favorable to me, so I'll tell you where I found this. The stall owner's voice stopped as he pointed at the white stone. In all honesty, this white stone was found by me in the magical Beast Mountain range. Oh! Hearing this answer, Jian Chen's eyes went back to the white stone once more. When he heard that the stall owner had picked up this item at the magical Beast Mountain range, it wasn't of any surprise to him. After all, there was always an opportunity anywhere for anyone. Even a farmer could stumble upon gold or another precious mineral while digging his farm. The stall owner looked at the interested face of Jian Chen and opened his mouth once more. Honored customer, this white stone has been in my possession for many years now. If it were not for the fact that I am in need of money, then I wouldn't have put it out on display in the first place. Seeing you are quite interested in it, why don't you buy it? Jian Chen looked at the white stone with one eye as he sized it up before looking back to the stall owner. How much is this white stone? His tone was especially flat. This white stone's very existence had caused many questions for him, so it was only right for him to buy it. Chapter 108. How much is it? This is. Seeing the expression on Jian Chen's face, the stall owner had a look of hesitation. Although he knew that this white stone was not an ordinary item by any means, he still didn't know what use it had. In order to understand the history behind this white stone, he had dove into multiple books about ancient treasures, but found nothing. He had even asked many close friends only to come up empty-handed. So after thinking it over, he had finally set a concrete price for this white stone. It was a shame that on this Tianyuan continent, there weren't many people that knew about this strange white stone, nor did anyone ever show this much curiosity toward it. But for those who were still curious enough to buy it, the moment they heard the price, every single person had put down the stone and immediately left. For while the stall owner knew this stone wasn't regular, he didn't know its use, but he still wanted to sell it for a decent price. So the moment everyone heard his price for the stone, they didn't hesitate to drop the stone and forget about it. When Jian Chen had asked about the price for this white stone, the stall owner felt undecided once more. He was really in need of money right now, so it could be said that this white stone was his sole way of earning money. If he set the price too high, then he was afraid that this Jian Chen would drop the stone and walk away like the other customers. But if he set the price too low, then he would feel uneasy in his heart. So with the price in question, his heart and mind were in contradiction with each other and didn't know what price to give. After hesitating, the stall owner opened his mouth. Honored customer, if you are really interested in this white stone, then please state your price for it. Hearing this, Jian Chen looked at the man with an amused smile. This is obviously your item, so it's only right for the price to be decided by you. Why would you want me to name a price? The stall owner became embarrassed as he listened to Jian Chen and laughed awkwardly. Honored customer, it isn't that I'm unwilling to say the price. Rather it's because I'm afraid that if I say a price, you'll be scared away. I've had many people express their interest in this white stone, but the moment they heard my price, they all put it down and left. Oh, then how much do you think this white stone is worth? Jian Chen asked with interest. He was already completely determined to buy this white stone regardless of the price or the true use of it. If it could provoke such a strong reaction from the azure and violet glow in his dantian, then this was no ordinary item. He couldn't say for sure, but this white stone could possibly solve the mystery about his dantian problems. So for that reason, Jian Chen was very determined to win this object. The stall owner bit his lip as he looked at Jian Chen. Honored customer, if you are this adamant in buying the white stone, then I shall tell you the price. Look here, will this much do? With that said, the stall owner held out 5 fingers on his hand as if to give Jian Chen a high five. Seeing this movement, Jian Chen couldn't help but have a joking expression on his face as he said uncertainly, "Could it be you're selling this for 50 gold coins?" Hearing this, the stall owner grew red in the face from the paltry amount, as if the amount Jian Chen had offered differed from his by thousands of coins. The stall owner sighed and spoke, "Honored customer, I will be straightforward with you and be clear. I want to sell this stone for 500 purple coins. Do you still want it?" As he spoke, the stall owner's eyes stared at Jian Chen closely. "What? 500 purple coins? Are you joking?" Jian Chen cried out in shock as he looked at the stall owner in disbelief. The moment he had heard the words purple coin, Jian Chen's lips felt especially heavy. 500 purple coins was equivalent to 50,000 gold coins. The stall owner's face grew even redder as he understood the look on Jian Chen's face. He knew that 500 purple coins was a price that would not have any buyers. That is, honored customer, if you can offer up a price that I can agree to, then at the very least I can sell it to you, the stall owner said in an agonized tone. With this, Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath as he sized up the white stone in his hand with uncertainty. After a long time, Jian Chen finally made up his mind. My highest price will be 100 purple coins. Whether I buy it or not, it's up to you."
With that, he stared at the stall owner with a heavy glance, but even he was quite nervous within his heart.
Jian Chen was determined to get this white stone. If he could easily buy it here, then it would be for the best. Even then, 100 purple coins was not a small amount at all for a stall owner. Jian Chen had already seen what this 30-year-old stall owner was like. Since the stall owner had such a shrewd mind, there was no way Jian Chen could reveal how interested he was in the white stone. Otherwise, if the stall owner found out how much he wanted it, who knew how high the price would go up? Not only that, but Jian Chen wasn't willing to let others know how much money he had on him. If it was found out, then those with sinister purposes would possibly come track him down looking for trouble. Although with his strength, he wasn't even afraid of enemies at the Saint Master level, but he wanted to avoid as much trouble as he possibly could. The moment the stall owner heard Jian Chen's offer of 100 purple coins, he grew happy but then immediately grew embarrassed. "Honored customer, could you possibly add a little more to that?" Jian Chen chuckled as he shook his head. Seeing the happy glint in the stall owner's eyes, Jian Chen understood what the man was thinking of. Seeing how Jian Chen wasn't going to go any higher with his price, the man looked a little disappointed. But after thinking it over while biting his lips, he nodded his head. "Okay, 100 purple coins it is, we have a deal." Taking out the 100 purple coins from within his space belt, Jian Chen slowly counted them out for the stall owner and then took the white stone for himself to store into his space belt before departing from the stall. Jian Chen had really wanted to study this strange white stone and its purpose, but in this busy street where people flowed like water in a river, this was not the best place for it. However, as Jian Chen left the area, two people had noticed him. These two people both looked to be 20 years old and both had a weak stature. "Xiao-san, it looks as if we've stumbled across an easy target." The shriveled youth on the left watched Jian Chen leave the area as he spoke with an excited voice. The one called Xiao-san nodded their head. "Right, that person doesn't seem too old, so his strength should be quite weak. Since he's also by himself, this is a good opportunity. Seeing him grab that many purple coins, I'm willing to bet that person will have more on him. Huang Ho-er, you go follow him while I go notify the rest." With that, Xiao Sen quickly disappeared into the crowd while Huang Ho-er began to follow Jian Chen. Chapter 109. Robbery encounter. Jian Chen continued to walk down the street after purchasing the white stone. Right now Jian Chen wasn't all that focused on researching the white stone. Instead, he was lazily strolling around the street just in case he would be lucky enough to find another treasure. However, what was strange for Jian Chen was that after he had bought the white stone, the azure and violet glow in his dantian had already calmed down. Although, Jian Chen no longer cared about the matter anymore, and only wanted nighttime to come so that he could study the white stone. If he was lucky, he would be able to make a discovery and figure out how to solve the problem with his dantian. If he could resolve the problem with his dantian, then his cultivation rate would improve without any more problems. Although the azure and violet glows were constantly taking a huge amount of his cultivation, they had allowed Jian Chen to absorb the energy from the monster cores without being affected by the berserk element within them. His consumption rate was still far too large, and Jian Chen was worried about his cultivation. If it were up to him, Jian Chen would rather have his original cultivation speed. Even if he could no longer easily handle the berserk element in the monster cores, he would find a way to deal with them. He did not want a situation that he could not control, because to Jian Chen, the azure and violet glow was like a ticking time bomb. They could go off at any time, and although he would have a slower cultivation rate, he wouldn't need to worry about getting more monster cores every single day. Plus, the amount of energy he would absorb from the monster core would be more than the amount he was currently absorbing. A Class 3 monster core was already enough to support his cultivation for several days. It could even last him dozens of days before all of the energy was consumed. In that case, as long as Jian Chen spent an entire day hunting magical beasts or monster cores, it was enough for him to train for several months. As the amount of time spent on hunting magical beasts decreased, the amount of time spent on cultivating would increase. Based on his calculations, even if the azure and violet glows in his dantian were removed, they wouldn't have much of an impact on Jian Chen's overall cultivation speed. Jian Chen wandered around the busy streets aimlessly and stared at the various street stalls on the side. Occasionally he would walk into a random store and take a look around. After discovering this strange white stone, Jian Chen was now curious if he could find any other fantastical things while traveling up and down the market street. Perhaps if he was lucky, he would find yet another object that would stir attention within his dantian. It was unfortunate that while he was walking on the market, he did not see anything else of value. It seems that these items cannot be found so easily. Jian Chen sighed with disappointment. Seeing how the sky was already getting dark, he had lost interest in trying to find anything new. Jian Chen stared off in the distance as he gave a grim smile. Right now there's not enough time. After I take care of the people behind me, I'll go rest up at a restaurant. Then tomorrow I'll head out with everyone toward the magical beast mountain range. As he said that, Jian Chen looked around himself for a less populated alleyway to walk through. Afterward, Jian Chen walked through the alleyway slowly, almost as if he was still window shopping. Just the road he was now traveling on was a more isolated path where less people traveled. Once more crossing into another secluded alleyway, Jian Chen finally ended up in a completely isolated lane with a dead end that was 4 meters tall. Stopping where he stood, Jian Chen turned around to be greeted with an empty road. With a look of disdain, he spoke evenly, "Friends, you've walked so far with me already. Could it be you're still unwilling to show yourself?" Not long after Jian Chen had spoke, a group of people walked out into the secluded lane. There was a dozen people around, with each person's age ranging from 20 to 30 years old. The oldest one of them looked to be around 40 years old. The moment the dozen people appeared, they began to spread out in formation and blocked up the entire width of the alley. Clearly, they didn't want to let Jian Chen leave the alley. But they didn't stop there. As they blocked up the alley, each person began to slowly walk toward Jian Chen while giving him an intense stare, making them look like fiends. Jian Chen could only smile as he watched the people approach. To him, these people were not fiendish looking at all. He could tell how strong they were with his spirit, so the exact strength of each of the people here was clear to him. Among the group, the weakest members hadn't even reached the saint level while 3 other members were at the great saint level. The biggest surprise was that the oldest member there was unexpectedly at the saint master level. Even the captain of the flame mercenaries, Captain Kendall, was weaker than this person by a single tier. This man was a middle saint master. This man was around 40 years old and wore a bluish-green robe. He had an exceptionally fierce expression on his face with his short hair swaying in the wind slightly. Right under his mouth was a large beard that was very predominant. Dear friends, after walking so far down the path with this one has to wonder what you are doing. Jian Chen said with a trace of a smile, but his tone was still flat. The eldest male with the power of a middle saint master stared fiercely at Jian Chen and growled. So you knew we were here all along? Jian Chen crossed his arms in front of his chest with a smile. Of course, you were following me so adamantly while traveling on the same road for so long. How would a person not notice? Hearing Jian Chen, the elder man looked at Jian Chen with a sudden look of realization. So it was like this. It would appear that we were too careless then. Then the man's face changed as his surprise look suddenly grew cold. Kid, right now this road has been blocked by us. If you don't want to die, then hand over every single coin and item within your space belt. Otherwise, prepare yourself to die here. If you want the things within my possession, then let's see if you have the strength to do so. Jian Chen said impassively. However, with each passing word, his tone grew colder and colder. With that said, the elder man didn't bother to say anything else and instead waved his hand. Everyone forward. Bring him down and whatever he has will be ours. The entire formation began to rush toward Jian Chen as they each brought out their saint weapons. For those who hadn't yet reached the saint level, there was a simple iron sword and shield in their hands as they charged fearlessly at him. Seeing the dozen people approach, Jian Chen sneered in disdain. Right as they got within 10 meters of him, he leapt into the air as if swallowed up by the sky. Both of his legs kicked off of the walls with an impressive amount of strength as he flew over the heads of the people below. As he flew toward the 40-year-old man, a familiar silver-colored sword appeared in his right hand as it then transformed into a silver streak of lightning. With a speed that was difficult for the naked eye to see, the sword stabbed at the middle-aged man's throat. After countless of improvements to his body, Jian Chen's body was relentlessly refined by the special properties of the Saint Force. So now his strength was far stronger than his previous life thanks to that same Saint Force, and even his speed had increased many times over. Even with such an ordinary-looking sword, its speed was so fast that even for a great saint it was hard to dodge. After all, if one wanted to increase their attack speed, they would need to use their Saint Force to enhance it, but this was a hard strain on the physical body. So thanks to Jian Chen's special body and fast swordplay, it was a better improvement to his previous life. Even compared to those on the Tianyuan continent, aside from those who were stronger than Jian Chen,
He was able to bypass the defenses of anyone at his strength level or below. If Jian Chen were to use his entire strength in his attacks, then no one at his level of strength would have an opportunity to retaliate and would have their throats stabbed before they knew it. Seeing Jian Chen charge at him so fiercely, the middle-aged man let out a sneer as he brought the huge axe up into the air. With both hands clasping the handle, a great amount of saint force was constantly flowing into his saint weapon as he cried out loud and then chopped down at Jian Chen with all his might. Ding! The light wind sword and the axe made contact with each other, causing a large explosion to take place. Following the sound, a large vibration was inflicted onto the man with an intensity so strong, it had caused his legs to weaken and stumble back a step or two. His eyes widened in astonishment as he stared disbelievingly at his opponent. This was because the man at first did not take Jian Chen's actions seriously. To him, Jian Chen was no more than a 20-year-old man who would possibly only have the strength of a saint at the most. Even if he was a genius, then he would be no higher than a primary great saint, so as far as he was concerned, a person like this was no match for his troops. After this exchange of blows, the man was shocked at this new discovery. Even though he hadn't placed too low of an importance on Jian Chen, this strength of his was far beyond his expectations. With this strength, the man estimated that Jian Chen was no weaker than he was. Jian Chen did a somersault in midair as he descended back down onto the ground. Dispersing the shock from the initial blow with ease, he didn't take a pause even after landing on the ground. Immediately charging toward the elder person once more, the light wind sword in his hand emitted a hazy glow of light that wrapped the entirety of the blade. To the naked eye, the sword looked as if it was a hazy silver ray of light as it shot toward the man's throat with a ridiculous speed.
Chapter 110. Traveling to the Magical Beast Mountain Range, Good Approach. The 40-year-old man shouted. While brandishing his saint weapon without the slightest trace of fear, his face grew solemn as he slashed at Jian Chen. Ding ding ding. The previously quiet alley suddenly grew loud with the sounds of saint weapons clashing with each other as Jian Chen and the elderly man continued to battle it out between them. Even though he was a middle great saint fighting against a middle saint master, he had not yet fallen despite it being a fierce battle. Jian Chen was exceptionally nimble as he moved around his opponent like a demon. The light wind sword in his hand relentlessly flashed toward the man's larynx, and each time the man's axe blocked his strikes. From the start, Jian Chen's attacks were like tidal waves of blows that left almost no chance for the man to retaliate, but gradually, the tidal wave of blows had slowly evolved into a fierce storm of blades that caused the man to not have any opportunities to retaliate. To be accurate, it wasn't that the man was unable to retaliate. In actuality, it was that if he were to try to strike back, then he was afraid that his attack would miss Jian Chen, and he would get a sword through his throat for his troubles. The man's entire forehead was now dripping with perspiration as he continued to fight. He didn't think that this seemingly 20-year-old male would possess such a strong amount of strength at the middle saint level. Not only was he narrowly dodging the blows as is, but what made the man afraid the most was that this youth's sword play was far too quick. Not only was his speed fast enough to make anyone astonished, the amount of times he could strike was intimidating as well. Right now, there was a large amount of regret within the 40-year-old man's heart. If he had known about Jian Chen's strength earlier, then he wouldn't have come over to try and rob him. On the side of the alleyway, the other people stared sluggishly at the fierce battle between Jian Chen and their boss. Just like the other man, no one had thought that Jian Chen, who looked to be much younger than they were, would be able to contend against their boss in terms of strength. Despite having a dozen people when they looked at this fight, they all knew that they would not be able to join in. If they were to rashly charge in, all they would accomplish would be a vain death. Even though they had 3 great saints, but even with the strength of the great saints, they were painfully aware that their boss was in a disadvantageous position thanks to Jian Chen's display of power. Since he could only block now, it could be said that the boss' life could be taken at any moment without trouble, and if they were to charge in, then they would be of no use. All of them knew that death would be the only thing awaiting them since they knew that their speed was not enough to dodge the lightning-quick sword that belongs to Jian Chen. Jian Chen and the middle-aged man once again fought to another standstill, but the middle-aged man was still in a bad position. Jian Chen stared at the man impassively as his right arm lashed out, transforming the light wind sword into a ray of silver light that streaked toward the man's throat once more. In a flash, the sword approached the man's throat. In the history of their battle so far, this was the fastest sword stroke he had displayed. The middle-aged man's face lost all shades of color in fright. Against a sword as fast as this, he practically had lost any chance of dodging or blocking this movement. In the eyes of the 40-year-old man,
This sword had already reached an inconceivable amount of speed, and could no longer be dodged by someone like him. So in an instant, the man's face had become deathly pale, but at the moment where his death was about to come to pass, the sword had reached the skin of his throat and stopped its momentum suddenly. At such a crucial moment like this, the light wind sword had stopped its forward thrust, only allowing the tip of the blade to touch the man's throat. Despite the tip of the light wind sword stopping at the skin of his throat, the man had suddenly felt that it was becoming extremely difficult to breathe. At the same time, he was feeling a very sharp point of pain from where the tip was touching against his throat, almost as if the sword had already pierced his throat.
The middle-aged man stood lifelessly where he was. At this point, he was completely terrified of moving. He was afraid that if he were to make the slightest movement, Jian Chen would then relentlessly plunge his sword into his neck. So right now, the man's face was dripping with cold sweat. SW, swear. Swordsman. Please spare my life. Next time, this lowly one won't bother swordsman ever again. The man's words were filled with terror for Jian Chen, each word barely coming out stronger than a stutter. Right now, his life was at the mercy of Jian Chen, so the thought of having no face towards someone as young as Jian Chen wasn't a problem for him. To him, as long as he could keep his life, then even kneeling toward Jian Chen wouldn't be an impossible task. Jian Chen stared at the middle-aged man with a small sneer. Slowly bringing back his sword, he said emotionlessly, "My mood today is quite good, so I do not have a desire to kill anyone. You better behave yourself in the future and not let me catch you doing something like this."
With the magical beast mountain range being so close by and your strength being decent enough, a few low-leveled magical beasts would be well in your capability to earn money.
With that said, Jian Chen left the alleyway. Yes, we will definitely comply with swordsman's command. We will never do such a thing again. The middle-aged man said frantically. It was almost as if the man was completely compliant with Jian Chen's orders. The moment Jian Chen's shadow left the alleyway, the middle-aged man let out a long breath of air and wiped his forehead clean of his sweat. Thinking back to that fight of life or death for him, the man was absolutely terrified out of his wits. In that recent moment, his entire life was hanging by a thread, ready to be severed. Leaving the alleyway, Jian Chen cut back into the busy roads before walking into a nearby restaurant. During the night, Jian Chen sat down on his bed and began to study the white stone in his possession. What exactly is this item? It looks like a stone, but the material it's made from isn't like a stone at all. One could say it's made of iron, but at the same time, one cannot say that. Staring at the white stone in his hand, Jian Chen was full of doubt and misgivings about it. From the start, it was because of the azure and violet glow in his dantian that made him interested in this white stone. At the beginning, it was the azure and violet glow that had initially felt happy and excited, but the moment after he had bought the white stone, his dantian had once more reverted back to its quiet state. Even with the white stone in the palm of his hand, the twin glows were not at all attracted to it in any way now. Jian Chen himself did not have the slightest understanding of the history behind this white stone. Although he had the expansive library from Kargath Academy as his source of knowledge, he still did not have a single piece of information about it. Restlessly, Jian Chen continued to study the white stone for the rest of the day. Aside from knowing that this stone was exceptionally solid, there wasn't any other piece of information he could glean from it. Whether he used water to boil it or fire to burn it, the white stone didn't have a single reaction or change. With no other choice, Jian Chen stuffed the white stone back into his space belt. Observing the glows in his dantian once more, he noticed that it was as peaceful as ever, not having any of the previous excitement shown earlier in the day. While the two glows were housed within Jian Chen's dantian, he was completely unable to do anything about the two. He couldn't get up close with the dantian, and could only observe these mysterious things from afar. If he got any closer, then he would suffer a strong feedback that he couldn't yet break through. So for that reason, Jian Chen had decided that trying to get any closer to them in his dantian would be a forbidden action. AI. Jian Chen sighed. Once he had come to this conclusion, he didn't know if this was a blessing or a curse. That night, Jian Chen was not cultivating for once. Instead, he was sleeping in his bed. For the first time in 3 months since he had left Jessen Kingdom, this would be the first night he would be able to sleep. Sleeping was a good way to restore his spirit, and with his large amount of spirit, if he were to refrain from using the spirit sword or control the light saint force, then it would be possible for him to go for a few days and nights without sleep. Not only that, but if he were to cultivate,
then his spirit would be slowly recovered. So for that reason, Jian Chen hadn't slept at all since there was no need for him to. The next morning, Jian Chen woke up and looked outside to see the early morning scenery. Taking in a fresh breath of morning air, he sighed. I haven't slept in months, so I nearly forgot how good sleeping was. Now that I have slept again, it really was very comfortable. Soon after, Jian Chen left the restaurant and rode a horse toward where Kendall was waiting for everyone. The flame mercenaries were again staying over at the same house as before. At that moment, 8 members of the flame mercenaries were still resting inside. Although they were a small mercenary group, they didn't have the funds to build a bigger house, so at the very least they could only afford a small house. Arriving at the house, Jian Chen tied his horse to a fixed fence post and prepared to knock on the door. Before he could knock, a weak-looking youth suddenly opened the door. The moment he saw Jian Chen, his eyes loosened in intensity as he backed away from the door. This was the second youngest member of the mercenary group, Xiao Dao. Jian Chen gave a small smile and said, Xiao Dao, are you planning to go out? Xiao Dao chuckled, I only just heard the sounds of a horse, so I thought it was you for sure. Opening the door, I see that I was right. Come in, Jian Chen. Everyone's already waiting for you. Chapter 111. Peaceful at last. Just as Jian Chen entered the house, he saw Captain Kendall sitting with the other members eating breakfast. On the table was a huge steaming plate of beef. Jian Chen, come and eat. Today we shall be hunting, so you need to eat your fill so that you can be full of energy when you're fighting against the magical beasts. Kendall motioned for Jian Chen to sit down next to him at the long table. Hoopa tore a piece of beef off and began to chew it. That's right, today we must eat until our stomachs are full. If we come across a strong magical beast, if we can't kill it, we can at least run away. Kendall looked at Hoopa with a disapproving look. Hoopa, do you really want us to come across a magical beast we cannot defeat? If we come across a Class 4 magical beast that specializes in speed, then the lives of our group will be forfeited to the Magic Beast Mountain Range. Kendall, I'm not just full of hot air. We have to take this seriously, I know. While Class 4 magical beasts scare me, we aren't going to the depths of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, so we won't be seeing any Class 4 magical beasts there. Hoopa said. Sitting down on the table, Jian Chen took a piece of beef and chewed it with his mouth. Uncle Kendall, what Hoopa said isn't wrong. Class 4 magical beasts are generally within the depths of the mountain range. As long as we don't go too far in, then we won't see any. Jian Chen had spent a decent amount of time there, so he was familiar with the environment there. Something like that can't be guaranteed. Kendall's face grew serious as he looked around the table. Even though we're only going to be around the outskirts of the mountain range, no one should drop their guard. While the majority of Class 4 magical beasts reside in the depths of the mountain range, there are still a few exceptions. A few bored Class 4 magical beasts could chase a few weaker ones to the outskirts of the mountain range. Something like this can happen on the Tianyuan continent. This is not a rare occurrence, it has happened many times before. Jian Chen nodded his head at this. He agreed with Captain Kendall's words because he had read many times in books that strong magical beasts would occasionally come out of their usual place as a result of boredom. However, this didn't happen enough for it to be extremely probable. In Jian Chen's time in the Magical Beast Mountain Range, he had never met a Class 4 magical beast while on the outskirts of the mountain range, and even Class 3 magical beasts were rare there. This piece of information is something we all know, and while we haven't yet come across such an event, some others have. All right, Kendall, stop talking about it, it makes everyone's heart feel heavy. If we really come across such an event, then it'll be our bad luck. Let's just eat for now and then hit the road. The next one to speak was the one who wasn't that much younger than Captain Kendall, as well as being one of the strongest mercenaries in the group, Deer. With the strength of a peak great saint, he was already close to becoming a saint master. The moment Deer spoke, everyone became calm once more and resumed eating from the plate of beef. In a flash, the platter of beef had quickly been wiped clean, leaving behind only bits and pieces. After the food was finished, everyone immediately set out on the road. Within their group of 10, only Jian Chen was riding on horseback while everyone else walked on foot. Jian Chen, when we get to the Magical Beast Mountain Range, what will you do about your horse? You can't possibly bring the horse in there. Kendall asked Jian Chen. Hearing Kendall, Jian Chen began to laugh as he patted the white mane of his horse. There's still 20 kilometers until we arrive at the mountain range. When we get there, I'll let the horse go. Xiao Dao immediately bounded forward when he heard what Jian Chen said and cried out. That can't be, Jian Chen. Could it be you want to let the horse go free? You're wasting such a large amount of money. Jian Chen could only laugh and say, if I'm letting it go, then why not let it have its freedom? On such a large continent, whether or not it can survive, it'll be up to its luck. Horses were the most common of animals on the continent as well as the most inferior and abundant type of transportation. Wild animals were also able to absorb the world essence and eat a few treasures to become magical beasts. Even these horses had the ability to become one. Jian Chen had once read that 100 years ago, there was a horse with the strength of a Class 5 magical beast. However, its potential was limited and its innate ability was lacking. Advancing in strength for them was a difficult path as well as a long one. Even though most of the people were walking on foot, the journey was progressing quickly. After 2 hours of traveling, everyone had finally reached the foot of the magical beast mountain range. Seeing the verdant plant life in front of him, Jian Chen disembarked from his horse and headed into the forest along with the group. The white horse stayed behind, but Jian Chen knew that after a while, it would leave by itself. From here on out, be careful everyone. Although the forests here have more wild animals than magical beasts, that doesn't mean we can drop our guards. Captain Kendall looked at everyone solemnly before continuing to say, Dear, Hu Pa and I will walk in front of the group. Zhou Dekai, Zhou Shaokai and Chongning Feng will walk behind the group. The rest will be in between us 6. After that, the group maintained the position ordered by Kendall and moved onward. On the road, although many wild animals had attacked them, their strength was incomparable to the Class 1 magical beasts who were also not a threat to their group. After 6 hours, the flame mercenaries finally reached the other side of the forest and entered the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range where the Class 1 magical beasts resided. Captain Kendall, who was walking ahead of the group, twisted his head back and said to everyone, Everyone prepare yourself to fight. From here on out, Class 1 and 2 magical beasts will be roaming around. However, even before Captain Kendall had warned everyone but Jian Chen had already long since prepared themselves for battle and stared around themselves intensely. The group continued to walk into the outskirts of the mountain range, but after walking for 4 hours, they had not seen a single magical beast. Within the group, Jian Chen continued to walk with his eyes flickering with indifference. With each step he took, he was already aware of every finite detail of the magical beast's activity around them. However, whenever a magical beast was hiding in the tall bushes 10 meters away from them, they would retreat. Not a single one would dare attack them, leaving Jian Chen to be perplexed beyond belief on why they were doing that. Could it be that the magical beasts have realized the strength of our group and don't want to die? Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together as he thought to himself. When he had been in the magical beast mountain range before, he had never come across such behavior. Unable to take it anymore, Jian Chen asked, Uncle Kendall, do you not feel as if something is wrong? Jian Chen's question had been heard by the sensitive ears of everyone in the group. The entire group turned around to look at him as Kendall asked, Jian Chen, what exactly is wrong here? Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before saying, This place is where Class 1 magical beasts roam about, so why is it we have not come across a single one yet? Upon hearing this, everyone let loose a relieved breath of air. They had thought that Jian Chen actually had something in mind that was related to an unfavorable event. Kendall laughed and said, Jian Chen, this is actually very common. Although this is the roaming grounds for Class 1 magical beasts, but the magical beast mountain range is vast, and this is only just one of the many roads. Not coming across a magical beast isn't rare. Every single time we've entered here in the past it has been like this. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together even more. In his heart, he knew that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. Captain Kendall, could it be that you've never come across a Class 1 magical beast yet? Jian Chen asked. It's not that, we just merely don't see one often. The majority of the beasts that appear are Class 2 and 3. Of course, there are times where we don't see a single Class 1 magical beast at all. He answered Jian Chen's questions patiently. Captain Kendall, then on average, how many monster cores do you usually get? Jian Chen asked. Not too few, Captain Kendall thought about it before saying, on average, we can get 4 or 5 Class 2 monster cores in a single day, and maybe 6 or 7 if our luck is good. Class 3 monster cores will be less since Class 3 magical beasts don't roam around here as often. So the chances of seeing one are slim, and since Class 3 magical beasts are hard to kill as well, it'll be difficult for us to avoid any injuries.
For that reason, if we come across any Class 3 magical beast, we try not to provoke it. Kendall paused for a moment before saying, when Deer makes a breakthrough to a Saint Master, then with our combined strength, it will be easy to kill a Class 3 magical beast. However, until Deer becomes a Saint Master, we need to do our best and avoid Class 3 magical beasts. Although Class 3 monster cores sell for a higher price than Class 2 monster cores, I don't wish to see any casualties. If we get a little bit more money in exchange for our lives, what use would that be? Chapter 112. Fighting the Black Tiger. Hearing Captain Kendall, Jian Chen nodded his head in approval. His impression of Kendall had once more grown. The evil in Kendall's heart was no more than Jian Chen's own in his previous life. With a selfless attitude like that, no person would refuse to lay down their lives for such a captain. Most importantly, with the captain's strength of a primary Saint Master, although he couldn't kill a Class 3 magical beast by himself, he could at least give Class 2 magical beasts a hard time. It was a shame that he didn't fight Class 2 magical beasts by himself. If he did, his profits would be much higher. To join with saints and great saints to hunt and kill magical beasts, although the profit distribution was merit-based, his own profits would still be many times smaller than going solo. In fact, the difference would be so huge that it wouldn't even be half the amount of what he could get by himself. With hearing just this bit, Jian Chen truly admired Captain Kendall. However, when it came to Captain Kendall and the amount of profit they earned in the magical beast forest in the past, he was shocked into silence. With the captain being of the Saint Master level and 5 other members being great saints, it was truly a pathetic amount of monster cores that they earned. Jian Chen just couldn't believe it. When he had gone solo within the magical beast mountain range, in the span of a day, he had collected at least 20 Class 2 magical beast cores. Even Class 3 monster cores had numbered around a dozen. Compared to what the flame mercenaries got, the difference between the two truly could not be compared. At that moment, Jian Chen's ear trembled slightly as he turned his head to look at the tall grass nearby. Inside, he could sense the movement of a magical beast moving about from 10 meters away. However, this magical beast was barely making any movements, so even Captain Kendall wasn't able to detect its presence. The magical beast paused for a moment, as if it were hesitating before it decided if it wanted to attack the group Jian Chen was in. In the end, it silently retreated. Sensing the magical beast's retreat, Jian Chen's mind was filled with doubt. What's happening? Could it be that the magical beasts have recognized the strength of our group, and realized that its own strength was only enough to send itself to its death? Jian Chen wondered, but as he thought about that, another question came into his mind. With the magical beast being so low in strength, how could it possibly have the knowledge to make such a decision? When Jian Chen had traveled to the magical beast mountain range, no matter if it was a Class 1 or 2 magical beast, or even a Class 3 magical beast, they would scurry out of their hiding spots to attack him. Even if they were in a hidden area, they would try to make a sneak attack, making this situation a lot more different than what Jian Chen was expecting. Just what is going on? Could it be our group has too many people in it? That could be why the magical beasts aren't attacking. Jian Chen looked backward with a doubtful look. On this single road, he had only seen the traces of a single magical beast. At that moment, a black blur came rushing out of the tall grass toward Captain Kendall, who was at the front of the group. Everyone had already prepared themselves for this situation. So the moment the black blur came into view, it had already been spotted by Kendall and Deer. Looking at the incoming target, Kendall laughed and cried out, "One finally came!" A large axe sharp enough to cut the air around it appeared in his hand. With a fluid motion, the axe was swung in a downward motion toward the black blur. When Kendall had begun to attack, Deer stood behind him with his broadsword out and ready to swing. Ding! Kendall's axe and the black blur made contact in midair, creating a large explosion of sound. The black blur came to a grinding halt as the axe was sent recoiling backward. The black blur flew backwards into the air for 5 meters before landing back down on the ground. The moment it touched the ground, every single member of the group got to see what had just attacked them. It was a tiger whose mane was completely black. Both paws had many sharpened claws, while some of them had even looked to be stained with blood. "Brothers, surround it," Kendall called out before grabbing his axe to once more attack the black tiger. Hoo-pa! Chong Ning Feng and the 2 Zhou twins encircled the black tiger in all 4 directions in order to prevent it from getting away. Deer, who had the power of a great saint, entered the circular ring and began to fight it with Kendall. This black tiger was only a Class 2 magical beast,
and with a Saint Master and a peak Great Saint fighting it, this black tiger didn't have a chance of surviving. In a flash, the black tiger's body was filled with wounds as blood flowed freely from it. As a result, its normally black body was dyed red. Jian Chen, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian stood and watched the battle from afar. While the magical beast had a natural superiority in instincts, this was only a Class 2 magical beast that was no match for a great saint. So for this battle, Xiao Dao and the other two saints were unable to intervene without fear of risking a serious injury. Watching Kendall and Deer fight it out, Xiao Dao was very eager to join in on the fight. Observing the two fight with the black tiger, Xiao Dao looked as if he had wanted nothing more than to reincarnate into Kendall and fight against the black tiger for a countless number of rounds. I have to work hard and cultivate so that I can become a Saint Master quickly. This way, I can hunt and kill Class 2 magical beasts by myself. Xiao Dao remarked as he bit his lips in determination. Hearing this, Yun Xian, who was standing by his side, laughed and said, "Xiao Dao, your strength right now should be at the middle saint, so it's still far in the future until you become a Saint Master. With your cultivation talent, you should be around 40 years old before you become a Saint Master, if not older." 40 years old, so what? Didn't Captain become a Saint Master at that age? Either way, I'll eventually reach the Saint Master level. Xiao Dao replied in a slightly dissatisfied tone. With a yearning expression reflected in his gaze, he muttered, "Wait until I gain the strength of a Saint Master. Then I can adventure around Magical Beast Mountain Range alone, and fight the magical beasts at close quarters, one-on-one. It will be an impressive sight." Seeing Xiao Dao's expression of yearning, Yun Xian grudgingly shook his head and inwardly whispered to himself, "Are Saint Masters that amazing? All they do is bully Class 2 magical beasts. You think that a Saint Master's strength is enough for them to rampage around Magical Beast Mountain Range without fear?" Yun Xian turned around to look at Jian Chen as he said, "Hey, Jian Chen, how many times have you entered Magical Beast Mountain Range? You're so small. Could it be that it's only your first time?" Jian Chen indifferently replied, "This should be my second time." Although Jian Chen had entered the forest at Kargath Academy and killed magical beasts there in the past, that experience couldn't possibly count formally. In addition, the magical beasts there had been raised by the academy, so Jian Chen simply ignored that experience. Yun Xian's eyes lit up. He immediately showed interest and impatiently asked, "Then how many people were with you when you first entered? How powerful were they? Did you have any experts as formidable as Kendall?" Jian Chen turned around to eye Yun Xian. After hesitating for a bit, he said, "The first time I entered the Magical Beast Mountain Range, I was alone." However, before Jian Chen had even finished speaking, he was interrupted by Yun Xian. "What? You entered Magical Beast Mountain Range alone your first time? Wow, Jian Chen. I really look up to you." Jian Chen bitterly smiled and replied, "Yun Xian, there's no need to speak so loudly. When I had entered Magical Beast Mountain Range alone my first trip, I had only wandered around the surrounding areas." Yun Xian looked at Jian Chen with an expression of admiration and said, "Jian Chen, I really respect you, especially your courage. You are really bold. Could it be that you didn't know that even the surrounding areas of Magical Beast Mountain Range are extremely dangerous? Encountering a Class 1 magical beast is fine. If you can't beat it, there's still a chance to flee. But if you meet a Class 2 magical beast, then your young life would be finished on the spot." Yun Xian patted his chest and he said with a trace of lingering fear, "However, a youngster like you was extremely fortunate to not have met such magical beasts. Otherwise, you most likely would have been doomed." "That's right, Jian Chen. From now, you mustn't come to the Magical Beast Mountain Range alone. Although our journey so far has been very tranquil, you definitely cannot underestimate the Magical Beast Forest just because of that." Xiao Dao said solemnly, his expression serious. Jian Chen bitterly smiled at the two's words and replied, "All right, I understand. For now, let's just go back to watching Captain's fight with Black Tiger. Watching this scene is really beneficial for you guys. You can at least learn some battle patterns. They would be pretty useful later on." Kobold stood by Jian Chen's side, his shocked gaze locked onto Jian Chen. He surveyed Jian Chen's body up and down a few times, and his eyes flashed brightly with an expression of indefinite bewilderment. However, he didn't say a word, and quietly stood there, motionless and silent. Hearing Jian Chen's words, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian really did stop talking, and returned their attention to the fight and concentrated on what was happening in front of them. Kendall and Deer continued to fight the black tiger for about the same amount of time it took for a cup of tea to be made. While the entire body of the black tiger was filled with wounds and blood, the combatants had finally brought out the true extent of the tiger's ferocity. With its life on the line, the black tiger's strength didn't falter at all and began to dodge the moves of the humans nimbly. With each dodge, it tried to strike back at Kendall and Deer. Chapter 113. A Reveal of Strength. Ha! Kendall shouted. The large axe made of his Saint Force swung behind him in a motion to chop off the head of the black tiger. The black tiger dodged the battle axe by leaping into the air toward Kendall. Extending its jaws, the black tiger prepared to bite down onto him. Immediately bringing back the battle axe, Kendall brought his Saint weapon up to defend himself, allowing the black tiger to make contact with that instead. The sharp fangs of the black tiger made contact with the hardened weapon with a crunching sound. The force of the impact was so strong that Kendall couldn't help but stagger back a few steps as trail marks were left on the ground. Not too long after, the paws of the black tiger landed on the ground. Before Kendall could regain his composure, the sharp claws of the tiger slashed at Kendall's chest. Kendall became alarmed at the speed of the claws. With his axe being bitten and held down by the tiger, it was useless in this case. At this crucial moment, Kendall sucked in a deep breath and readied his body. At the same time, the black tiger's sharp claws slashed across his chest with a cold ripping sound as his clothes were ripped apart. Along with his clothes, Kendall's blood splattered into the air as the claws made contact. This time, although Captain Kendall had taken the claws to his chest head-on since there wasn't enough time to dodge, it was only a superficial wound. He had been worried that the claws would have brought out a larger amount of damage, but this didn't seem to be the case. Just as the black tiger raked its claws across Kendall's chest, a large broadsword chopped down onto the tiger's back with a ferocious amount of force. As the sword met the tiger's back, a large wound could be seen, but thanks to the resilience of the tiger, the wound was only the size of a palm in length. As he watched the fight with the black tiger, Jian Chen shook his head helplessly. In his eyes, whether it was Kendall or Deer, neither of the two had shown their superiority with their weapons. Just looking at how they held the weapon, it was almost as if they didn't know how to use them. They had swung wildly without any sort of form or discipline. It was Deer who had annoyed Jian Chen the most. Every single weapon had its own characteristics and special pattern of attack. Deer didn't know how to use a sword at all, so the sword in his hand wasn't able to show off its true power. Deer had even unexpectedly at times used the sword like a knife and recklessly chopped at his enemy. As the battle continued, Captain Kendall and Deer had accumulated a few tiny wounds. At the same time, the black tiger suddenly faced the skies and released a roar that shook the heavens, destroying the silent atmosphere of the magical Beast Mountain range. Right after the shout, the black tiger suddenly released another few strikes before dodging both fighters and turning around to run away. Careful, it wants to run. Block it. For the love of everything, don't let it run away. Standing where the black tiger was attempting to run away to was Chongning Feng. Seeing the incoming magical beast, the glint in his eyes never stopped as he brought out his sword in front of him. With a large amount of Saint Force focused into his sword, he stabbed at the black tiger. At such a crucial moment like this, he had to make sure he focused everything on this one strike in order to avoid a long and drawn-out battle. While Chongning Feng moved to initiate combat, the other mercenaries weren't idle. Kendall and Deer quickly ran forward to attack the black tiger from behind. Ho! The black tiger emitted another deep growl as it lashed out with its claws once more. Its front paws smashed into Chongning Feng's sword, causing it to shake from the strong force. Afterward, the black tiger opened its mouth wide and snapped at Chongning Feng. Chongning Feng retreated backward while his sword went up ready to parry. Instead, he stabbed at the incoming bite. Ding! Although the sword did not penetrate the black tiger's mouth, it had swiped against the fangs of the beast as it reared its head backward. Biting down on the sword, the tiger had prevented Chongning Feng from pulling his sword out and fighting with it. Bastard, go die! At this moment, a loud sound came from behind the black tiger. It was Captain Kendall who had quickly approached it from behind with his large axe raised high into the air, emitting a loud sound as it chopped down onto the tiger's back. At the same time, Deer and a few other saints began to approach the tiger from Chongning Feng's side and tried to obstruct the black tiger. The black tiger released its hold on the sword as it turned to face Captain Kendall behind it with his axe raised. Dodging his axe swiftly, the black tiger did not manage to come out unscathed as the axe clipped its body and cut away a patch of fur. Ow! The black tiger let out a pain-filled roar as it turned around and sped off in the opposite direction. However, just as it began to run, Jian Chen and the others saw that it was heading toward them, leaving them no choice but to take part in the fight. Seeing the direction the black tiger was going, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian's face changed drastically as they cried out in shock and turned toward the side to escape from it. Kobolds was the first to avoid the black tiger with an extremely fast speed, running far away. Soon, it was only Jian Chen who stood his ground by himself without a single trace of fear on his face. Jian Chen, dodge quickly! Kendall yelled out before dashing forward in an attempt to block off the black tiger from its path. However, even with his Saint Master strength, his speed wasn't enough to catch up with the Class 2 magical beast. Seeing Jian Chen block its path, the black tiger's eyes grew crimson as it released another roar. Quickly afterward, it increased its speed toward Jian Chen. Seeing how Jian Chen stood his ground without any consideration of moving, the members of the Flame Mercenaries could only cry out in regret as they watched the scene unfold before them. In regards to Jian Chen's strength, everyone had only thought that he had the strength of a saint. If a great saint had difficulties fighting this black tiger, then a saint would definitely have no chance of resisting it. Even though the black tiger had already sustained plenty of wounds, the serious state it was in had aroused its ferocious nature. Its fighting strength hadn't taken a decrease in intensity. Instead, it had only grown stronger. Seeing the black tiger pounce toward him, Jian Chen's previously dull expression suddenly flashed with a cold light. His 2 fingers wide and 1.33-meter-long silver light wind sword abruptly appeared in his right hand. The only thing that could be seen was a silver light flashing in front of the black tiger. At the same time, Jian Chen's body also whirled around, leaning toward the side, about 1 step away from where he had previously been standing. Pang! The black tiger's enormous and cumbersome body heavily fell to the ground where Jian Chen originally had stood. Its body showed no signs of movement at all. The next instant, crimson blood began to rush out of the black tiger's neck, and gradually pour over the uneven ground, spreading in all directions. Just as he was swiftly charging forward, Captain Kendall's advancement was abruptly halted. He stared blankly at the black tiger that was now motionless on the ground. Kendall quietly stood in his tracks as he looked at Jian Chen, who stood there with an unchanged expression. Kendall's eyes were filled with astonishment and incredulity. He had just seen an unimaginably fast, blurred figure of a sword flash before the black tiger's eyes at an insane speed. Right after, the black tiger had collapsed to the ground, completely still. Captain Kendall's gaze finally fell onto the 2 fingers wide silver sword in Jian Chen's hand. He noticed that there wasn't a single trace of blood dirtying the glossy and dazzling blade. Yet it was because of this that Kendall felt even more shocked. In the short instant he looked at Jian Chen, his gaze changed countless times. From doubt to amazement, from disbelief to shock, the emotions flickering through his eyes one after another. At that moment, the remaining 5 saints finally rushed over. They hadn't yet discovered that the black tiger was already dead. The 5 of them charged forward and surrounded the black tiger, and they immediately began to strike toward the black tiger's body with their saint weapons in their hands. This magical beast has already died. Everyone, there's no need to fight it anymore. Just as the 5 mercenaries were about to pierce the black tiger's body, Captain Kendall's slightly trembling voice rang out. Hearing this, the 5 great saints all had blank looks on their faces. The saint that had just struck downward had also forcibly stopped his movement midair. Immediately afterward, the 5 people's gazes all shifted in unison to the black tiger's body that had fallen before them, closely inspecting it. Only now did the 5 people clearly see that there was fresh blood violently spurting out of the black tiger's neck. The black tiger's red eyes that had originally held a fierce and terrible glint had now become spiritless voids. Strange, how did this black tiger die? Wasn't it jumping around healthy and alive just a second ago? How did it suddenly die? Hoopa asked in confusion. Hearing this, the remaining 4 great saints all glanced at each other with doubtful expressions. Captain Kendall stared long and hard at Jian Chen and said, "This black tiger was killed by Jian Chen." "What? Jian Chen killed it? Captain, are you serious?" Hearing Captain Kendall's words, Xiao Dao jumped up, and one could tell from his expression that he wasn't quite convinced. Xiao Dao wasn't the only one having difficulty accepting this. Everyone in the Raging Flames mercenary group had expressions of disbelief on their faces after hearing those words. Chapter 114. Zhou mercenaries. Everyone in the Flame mercenaries had thought that Jian Chen's strength was of the saint level. Even his mercenary badge had declared him to be a D-ranked mercenary, and the most important factor was that Jian Chen was so young as well. On the Tianyuan continent, if a 20-year-old was able to become a saint, then their strength was bright and their potential was unimaginable. For a seemingly 20-year-old like Jian Chen who was capable of killing a Class 2 magical beast, even if it was injured, no one in the proximity would have been able to believe it if they hadn't seen it. However, aside from Captain Kendall, no one saw the faint hazy outline of the sword, or how Jian Chen had killed the black tiger. Kendall's eyes wavered on the slender sword of Jian Chen's for a moment before growing calm once more and laughed. "If you guys don't believe it, then go ask Jian Chen yourself." There was a smile on his face as he said this, but how could he not be happy? There was one more expert in his group now. Xiao Dao was the first to give in. Running up to Jian Chen while looking at him from up to down, his eyes finally settled onto the blood-free light wind sword. "Jian Chen, please tell me honestly, did you kill the black tiger?" Seeing the look of disbelief on Xiao Dao's face, Jian Chen nodded his head and said, "That's correct, I killed it." From the very beginning, Jian Chen hadn't planned on hiding his strength with lies, so he was very straightforward and honest with Xiao Dao. "Wow, no way." Xiao Dao's eyes widened in surprise. In disbelief, Xiao Dao looked at the calm Jian Chen and spoke. "This fierce Class 2 magical beast was really killed by you? How did you do that and how come I didn't see how you did it?" Hearing Xiao Dao ask these questions, everyone but Kendall stared at Jian Chen attentively. Whatever method Jian Chen had used to kill the Class 2 magical beast, it was natural for them all to be curious. To them, all they saw was Jian Chen suddenly move to the side while using his thin and slender sword in a strange way to kill the black tiger, but none of them had figured out how or what method was used. In the midst of everyone, there was only one person who looked at Jian Chen differently. It was Kobolds who stared at Jian Chen in a way that looked as if to say to himself, "It was just as I thought." Jian Chen let a grim smile take hold of his lips as he raised his light wind sword. "I used my saint weapon to kill the beast. If you guys didn't see it, it's because my movements were too fast to catch." Hearing what Jian Chen said, Captain Kendall thought back to the flash of silver he had just seen and couldn't help but be afraid. This was because he had no choice but to admit that Jian Chen's sword was just far too quick and he could only see the faint afterimage of the sword. At this moment, Capital Kendall couldn't help but think, if he were to battle an opponent who possessed such speed, would he be able to dodge their attacks? Chong Ning Feng looked at the corpse of the black tiger below and kicked it. The body of the black tiger flipped over by his kick before he bent down to grab the black tiger's head to reveal the cut on its neck as everyone saw the fatal blow on the black tiger's neck. Even Captain Kendall couldn't help but take in a sharp breath because the wound was way too deep. Just looking at the neck, one could see that 2/3 of it had been completely cut off. Only 1/3 of the skin was attached to the rest of the body, making it seem as if the head of the black tiger was about to snap off at any moment. What was even more unimaginable was that the black tiger had clearly leapt toward him so fast that it looked as if it was gliding. For Jian Chen to accurately deliver a fatal blow to its throat, this was an act of skill no one else in the group could match. Deer took in a deep breath of air to calm his beating heart as he looked at Jian Chen. With a smile he said, "Jian Chen, before we had only thought that you were a saint, but it seems like your strength was far beyond our imagination. You really did keep us in the dark." Hoopa walked on over to Jian Chen and extended his hand onto Jian Chen's shoulder. "Jian Chen, you are far too mean. Be honest with me. How strong are you? You can't be even more amazing than our captain, right?" Hearing what Hoopa said, Jian Chen could only laugh helplessly. "Brother Hoopa, I'm nowhere as amazing as you say. My strength isn't too far away from yours. I am a middle-grade saint." "That's not right. How could a middle-grade saint kill a Class 2 magical beast so easily?" Hoopa said with surprise, but instead of asking Jian Chen, he turned around to talk to everyone else. "First, let's take care of the body of the black tiger before we continue talking about this." Even as they obeyed Hoopa's command, everyone was still doubtful. However, they didn't say anything and started to prepare the black tiger. This black tiger was quite amazing. Even though it had the strength of a Class 2 magical beast, it was faster than a Class 3 magical beast. After taking the monster core, put the rest of the body within a space belt so we can sell it for a great amount of money," Kendall said. On the Tianyuan continent, with regards to the type of meat consumed, other than regular beef, most of them came from magical beasts. Magical beast meat was not only tender, but it even smelled good too. Another good benefit was that eating it would also help reinforce the body. Thus magical beast meat were considered a hot-selling item. When it came to high-leveled magical beasts, the supply could never meet the demand. Jian Chen absorbed the light wind sword back into his body, and watched as the mercenaries stored away the body of the black tiger. He didn't care that it was a Class 2 magical beast since he could easily kill a Class 3 magical beast at any time. In the hands of Jian Chen, the magical beasts had no way of escaping. The flame mercenaries were different. They had only one Saint Master. Even with their strengths combined, they couldn't be compared to Jian Chen. Killing a peak Class 2 magical beast had been difficult for them. And if it weren't for the fact that Jian Chen had blocked the black tiger, they wouldn't have been able to catch up to it. These magical beasts could be said to be like fish in water. Different from humans, their movements wouldn't be restricted by the lush forest environment. Jian Chen's ears trembled once more and he turned his head to the side. As his eyes landed on top of a few bushes that started to shake violently, a group of 20 mercenaries wearing steel helmets and full body armor walked into their line of sight. Just as the fully armed mercenaries walked into their sights, everyone in the flame mercenaries immediately stopped what they were doing and watched the 20 mercenaries with a tense expression. The leader of the 20 mercenaries looked at the flame mercenaries with a cold glare and then at the halfway stored black tiger. With a wave of his hands, he barked out, "Onward!" commanding the rest of the mercenaries to walk past the flame mercenaries without looking back before finally melting out of sight. In the group's eyes, the flame mercenaries weren't even worth a glance. Those were the Zhou mercenaries. I didn't think we'd come across them here. After the iron-clad mercenaries left, Hu Pa let out a breath of air. "Brother Hu Pa, are the Zhou mercenaries that well known?" Jian Chen asked. Hu Pa nodded his head in response. While the Zhou mercenaries aren't considered the strongest in Wake City, the residents of Wake City will say that the Zhou mercenaries are for sure within the top 10. Their group has around 50 people with their leader at the peak Saint Master level. Under his direct command are 6 middle Saint Masters with around 20 great saints. Their strength is so enormous that our flame mercenaries definitely cannot provoke them. Plus, the Zhou mercenaries have the backing of one of the strongest clans in Wake City, the Zhou clan. With this, there aren't many in Wake City that could challenge them. Oh! Jian Chen looked to where the Zhou mercenaries disappeared to, their image not disappearing from his mind. Jian Chen, if you come across such a person or group in the Magical Beast Mountain Range in the future, please be careful. The Magical Beast Mountain Range is a common place for people to be killed over their items. There are even some people who are mercenaries, but their actions place them on the same level as a bandit. Kendall warned Jian Chen with a serious and grave face. Seeing how serious Kendall was, Jian Chen nodded his head. "I'll be careful." After that, the black tiger's corpse had been properly stored within a space belt. Right now we are in an area where Class 2 magical beasts roam. Any deeper and Class 3 magical beasts will be found. So for our sake, let's start to wander around here. Soon after, Kendall and Deer began to address their wounds, which were thankfully not very deep and wouldn't affect their fighting strength by too much. With a little preparation, the two were ready to get back on the road while staying vigilant of their surroundings. After traveling a short distance, Jian Chen had detected the footprints of another magical beast, but this time it was just like the magical beast before the black tiger. This magical beast was using the cover of the forest to hide 10 meters away from the mercenaries before silently retreating. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together as he tried to understand just what was happening. On the road, aside from killing that one Class 2 magical beast black tiger, he had detected the presence of at least 10 different magical beasts, but none of them had been like the black tiger and attacked them. Could it be that it's because there are too many people that the magical beasts are afraid to attack us? Jian Chen asked himself. However, this thought was immediately dismissed, for it made no sense at all. Chapter 115. A generous prophet. Jian Chen stared at the mercenaries walking in front of him when a flash of realization came. Of course, it's intimidation. This has to be due to the murderous air we're emitting. Jian Chen's eyes sparkled as he came to this realization. After seeing so many magical beasts retreat without a fight from this group, it had, after all, been because the entire group was releasing an intimidating amount of killing intent into the air around them. Although the magical beasts lacked wisdom, they were born with superior genetics that granted them formidable instincts. The moment they sensed an opponent they wouldn't be able to beat, their primal instincts would urge them to immediately cower and run away. Thinking about this, Jian Chen opened his mouth. "One moment please, everyone suppress your killing intent. Otherwise, we'll just continue about this path without seeing another magical beast." Kendall turned his head in the manner of a fox as he asked, "Jian Chen, is that useful?" "Whether it's useful or not will be known after everyone tries it for themselves.
Jian Chen didn't want to bother to explain.
Hearing what Jian Chen had said, Kobolds began to think to himself for a moment as the glint in his eye grew brighter and brighter.
Everyone should believe in Jian Chen for now. These past few times we entered the magical beast forest, we would always come across only a few class 1 magical beasts.
I had always found this to be strange, but until now, I hadn't an answer for it, so we can't outrule what Jian Chen has said here.
So even kobolds would say something like this. Then let's follow Jian Chen's suggestion, said the elder of the Zhou twins. Kobolds had only the strength of a saint, but he was extremely smart.
His past suggestions had been of great benefit to the flame mercenaries before, so everyone would readily agree with what he said.
After a while, everyone had slowly started to suppress their killing intent to the point where not even a small amount could be felt leaking out. Just as everyone finished suppressing their killing intent, they barely traveled 3 kilometers before a class 1 magical beast appeared. This made every single member of the flame mercenaries happy at the new change of events. Although a class 1 monster core was worth less than a class 2 monster core, killing a class 1 magical beast was an easy task.
As long as there were class 1 magical beasts, the road ahead of them would be filled with generous profit.
Haha, so we finally came across a class 1 magical beast. Captain Kendall, please allow me, Kobolds and Yun Xian to deal with this one. Xiao Dao cried out in joy as a small dagger appeared in his hand. Striking at the magical beast, Kobolds and Yun Xian followed behind quickly. Seeing the small knife in Xiao Dao's hand, Jian Chen shook his head in exasperation. No wonder he was called Xiao Dao, it was because his saint weapon had been a tiny blade. Turning his gaze over to Kobolds and Yun Xian, both wielded a two-handed sword.
After a while of the three fighting it at such a dangerously close distance, the cooperation of the 3 mercenaries finally killed the magical beast.
None of the great saints like Jian Chen had any desire to join in on the fight, since all of them had fully believed that the 3 saints would be able to take care of the class 1 magical beast. Continuing onward, the group couldn't walk for long without coming across a few class 1 and even some class 2 magical beasts. But this type of outcome had proved to everyone how Jian Chen's theory was true. By nightfall, the group had found a place to rest in and prepared a big campfire. While eating the meat from a magical beast for dinner, they had begun to tidy up the profits they had earned today. Sitting in front of the campfire was Captain Kendall, who watched the flames flicker and dance with a smile as a pile of monster cores sat next to him. Everyone, right now let's talk about today's harvest. Kendall laughed as he looked around himself. Today, we earned a total of 20 monster cores. 7 class 2 monster cores and 13 class 1 monster cores, making our profits exceed far more than in the past. At the last few words, Kendall had practically yelled it out, making it clear that he was beyond excited. Haha, we have to thank Jian Chen for this.
If it weren't for his advice, we wouldn't have come across even a single class 1 magical beast.
Hoopa laughed as he took a drink of his wine. Chong Ning Feng laughed as well. Hoopa is right. Brother Jian Chen's contributions for today's profit cannot go unnoticed. From the 7 class 2 magical beasts, Jian Chen had killed 3 of them by himself. Brother Jian Chen, come. Take a drink. Chong Ning Feng held out his wine gourd towards him. Jian Chen took the gourd from Chong Ning Feng and took a drink joyously. Don't say things like this. When we talk about contributions, everyone in this group had contributed. What can be said for sure, however, is that this time's trip in the magical beast mountain range has given the group a profit never seen before. Haha, that's correct. With an expert like Brother Jian Chen here, our flame mercenaries has gotten a harvest far richer than anything else. Kendall spoke merrily. Seeing this pile of monster cores here makes me feel as if I am one step closer to my dream. Captain, what is your dream? Xiao Dao asked curiously. My dream is for our flame mercenaries to be the #1 mercenary group on the Tianyuan continent. Captain Kendall roared happily as he said, "This is my biggest dream." Hearing this, everyone began to laugh with him. The #1 mercenary group on the Tianyuan continent. Kendall, your dream will be impossible to accomplish. Hoopa slapped Kendall on his back in a joking way. That's right. What Hoopa said is right. Kendall, your dream is like something from a fantasy.
Following what you say, then I desire to be the strongest expert in the Tianyuan continent.
Deer laughed. Ha ha ha, the #1 expert on the continent, you dream highly. Jian Chen sat by the fire and smiled as he watched everyone gossip among themselves. Every so often, he would laugh with everyone, and at this moment within his heart, he was completely content for the first time in a long time.
Although everyone was joking around with each other, but with each word they spoke to one another revealed the deep bonds of friendships between them all and even infected Jian Chen with it. After the food was eaten and the wine exhausted, everyone began to sprinkle some powder around themselves and the campsite to prevent their qi from escaping and being detected by the surrounding magical beasts. Then, they extinguished the campfire and dug into their tents to rest for the night. Jian Chen carelessly reclined within his own tent as he thought about a few things from the day. Right now in his hand were 2 Class 4 monster cores, but those were the only monster cores he had left. Even if he wanted to cultivate, he had no desire to use the Class 4 monster cores. When he would become a Saint Master, then he would use the Class 4 monster cores to cultivate. It looks like tomorrow I should encourage Captain Kendall to go hunting for Class 3 magical beasts. If I can't get at least 3 Class 3 monster cores every day, then I won't be able to cultivate. Jian Chen thought to himself. With my strength, I should be able to kill any Class 3 magical beasts with ease, and with Captain Kendall and the group's cooperation, then that means at least 2 Class 3 magical beasts can be fought simultaneously. As long as we don't bump into 4 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, then there won't be any danger. The Flame Mercenaries should probably be able to stay in the Magical Beast Mountain range for a month or so. Since the group is quite decent, I should try my best to help procure some monster cores for them during this time. A month after, I'll leave the group and put all my efforts in strengthening myself. I'll treat this month as a break. After all, the anti-venom genes within my body from the silver-striped golden snake haven't fully been incorporated into my bloodstream yet. While waiting for this, I need to focus on not sustaining any injuries, otherwise the blood with the anti-venom genes will flow away. If I can prevent that, then my bloodstream will have a constant source of anti-venom genes flowing through it, granting me the 1000 immunity. By that point, I'll never be able to be poisoned by anyone else as long as it doesn't reach the levels of a silver-striped golden snake in toxicity. Jian Chen lay back onto the ground of his tent as countless thoughts went through his head. Only after some time did he begin to calm himself and listen to his surroundings. After confirming it was safe, he began to sit cross-legged and absorb the world essence in the air to cultivate. Despite the fact that absorbing the world essence would only give him 1% of what he should normally getting, Jian Chen had no desire to sleep or give up any chance to increase his own strength. Chapter 116. Magical Horned Boar. The morning came as the sky grew brighter. Jian Chen, who was cultivating the world essence, finally opened his eyes. Feeling his internal saint force stay the same size instead of growing, Jian Chen could only sigh. Although his current cultivation rate for the world essence was far faster than before, whenever he cultivated, the world essence had practically been devoured by the 2 glows in his dantian. So his true cultivation rate could practically be ignored. Walking out of his tent, Jian Chen stood in the fresh morning atmosphere with his head raised up high to look at the tree branches overhead. In this morning hour, the air was filled with mist and it was quite dim out as the sun was still rising from the east. Hearing the faint snoring sounds coming from the other tents, Jian Chen shook his head in disappointment. With his strong sense of hearing, Jian Chen could detect that every single mercenary was fast asleep, and not a single one of them were cultivating. AI, how lazy! How do they think they could increase their strength? On the road of cultivation, while talent is very important, hard work is just as important as talent. Even if a man has the talent, if he does not work hard to cultivate, then his achievements will be no better than a man with no talent but is hardworking. Jian Chen thought to himself. After walking into the forest to get a tree branch, Jian Chen restarted the fire and fashioned out a simple grill to cook a few pieces of magical beast meat. Perhaps it was the outside movement that had awoken Kendall, but his head popped out from his tent to stare at Jian Chen, who was roasting meat. Jian Chen, why is it you're up so early? He laughed. Without even turning around in response, Jian Chen said, the sky is getting bright, so it's no longer that early. Captain Kendall looked up at the brightening sky and laughed. Without saying anything, he walked out from his tent and sat down next to Jian Chen by the fire. Just as Captain Kendall walked out of his tent, the other members of the group were awakened by the noise as well. Walking out of their tents, they proceeded to pack up and store everything into their space belts as they began to gather around the campfire. Even Hu Pa approached the campfire with a gourd of wine as he continued to drink from it. Seeing everyone up and at the campfire, Jian Chen looked at Kendall and said, Captain Kendall, what do you plan to do next for our course of action? The next thing we should do is to stay around this area for a while and continue to hunt down Class 1 and 2 magical beasts. Let's continue this for a few days at the Magical Beast Mountain Range so that we can build up a nice amount of profit before leaving," Kendall said plainly. Hearing this, Jian Chen went silent for a moment before opening his mouth to ask, "Captain Kendall, I have a suggestion. Would you please listen to it?" Kendall's eyes lingered on Jian Chen as he laughed and said, "Jian Chen, whatever suggestion you have, say it. There's no need to think twice about what you're about to say. Although you've joined our flame mercenaries only recently, everyone here is still your brother, so whatever you say won't be taken as an insult. I suggest that we go a bit deeper and directly kill Class 3 magical beasts." Jian Chen levelly looked at Kendall. "What? Kill Class 3 magical beasts? Jian Chen, you've gone crazy. A peak-level Class 2 magical beast was already so difficult to kill, let alone a Class 3 magical beast." Xiao Dao exclaimed in shock. Although the flame mercenaries now had the middle great saint, Jian Chen, in Xiao Dao's eyes, killing a Class 3 magical beast with this amount of power was still difficult. Hearing Jian Chen's proposal, everyone's eyebrows furrowed together. The flame mercenaries had one primary saint master and 6 great saints, but the magical beast had an innate superiority over the humans who were of the same strength level of them. If a person didn't have a battle skill or an attribute, then it would be practically impossible to kill a magical beast on the same level of strength as them. Even if they could, the price they would have to pay for doing so would be tremendous. On this magical beast mountain range where Class 3 magical beast roamed, if the flame mercenaries were to come across a primary Class 3 magical beast, then they would be able to kill it with some difficulty. However, if they were to come across a peak Class 3 magical beast, then they would have no chance at all. After killing a peak Class 2 magical beast, Captain Kendall and Chongning Feng had been injured. If it weren't for Jian Chen's intervention, then it wouldn't have been possible for them to capture and kill the magical beast. So for that reason, Jian Chen's suggestion to kill a Class 3 magical beast to the flame mercenaries was an attempt of suicide. Kobolds looked at Jian Chen with a curious glint in his eye. "Jian Chen, to think that you are suggesting to go kill a Class 3 magical beast, then I presume that you have the ability to kill a Class 3 magical beast?" Hearing kobolds, Jian Chen hesitated for a second before nodding his head. "As long as we don't come across 3 Class 3 magical beasts, I can safely say we won't be in mortal danger." Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. Doubt and disbelief clouded their eyes as they stared at Jian Chen. "Jian Chen, so what you're saying is that as long as we don't come across 3 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, then we won't be in any danger at all," Kendall said with a deep breath. If what Jian Chen said was true, then Kendall would want to bring Jian Chen with him to go kill some Class 3 magical beasts. After all, Class 3 magical beasts had a body and a monster core that were far more valuable than a Class 2 magical beast. "Jian Chen, do you really have enough strength to kill a Class 3 magical beast?" Deer asked to clarify. Although Jian Chen had killed a peak Class 2 magical beast, but the black tiger had already been injured, so its strength was far different than a Class 3 magical beast in perfect condition. "That's right, Jian Chen, something like this can't be randomly said and tried, otherwise you might throw away your life in the attempt," Chongning Feng said with worry. Jian Chen smiled at everyone. Despite everyone's reaction to this suggestion, Jian Chen wasn't unhappy with them. After all, killing a Class 3 magical beast was a task far too difficult for the flame mercenaries. Regardless of whether they were careful or not, they would still sustain a few injuries. "Everyone should believe me this time. If we really cannot beat a Class 3 magical beast, then we at least have enough strength to run away," Jian Chen said with firm conviction. Hearing this, everyone's eyes gathered at the figure of Captain Kendall. Regarding such an important decision like this, it would be for the best for Captain Kendall to make the final decision. Kendall took in a deep breath of air as he stared at Jian Chen. Seeing how Jian Chen seemed to have complete faith in himself, Kendall bit his lips and finally made a decision. "Then how about this? We'll believe in what he says this time. Jian Chen, if you truly do believe yourself, then I'll let you lead the group for a while. Whatever we do will be up to you to guide us. Does anyone have any problems?" Kendall said to everyone else. "I've no problems. No problems here. I don't have any problems here either." Kendall's decision had quickly convinced everyone else without anyone having a disagreement. Jian Chen's face had a big smile on it as he said, "Then, since everyone has confidence in me, I will definitely make sure not to disappoint anyone. Let me plan a few things then." Jian Chen's voice stopped for a moment before saying, "Let me walk in the front while everyone else take the same positions. If we come across a Class 3 magical beast, Then let me up first while everyone else surrounds it to prevent any other attacks. If any other magical beasts come, then you guys should attack those. But remember to take care of your own life. As long as you can stall the other magical beasts from attacking me, that'll be enough." When they heard Jian Chen's plan, everyone looked at each other with a dubious look. They had felt extremely curious about this plan, to have a middle great saint fight against a class 3 magical beast by himself? This sort of plan was kind of unpleasant to hear since they all took a class 3 magical beast seriously. After eating breakfast, everyone finished packing up their things and headed for the deeper parts of the magical beast mountain range. This time, however, the formation of the group was slightly different, with Jian Chen walking by himself 10 meters ahead of the group who retained their original positions. Not a single member of the group emitted any murderous intent while traveling, causing some class 1 magical beasts to be attracted to them. However, since they wanted to continue on their journey quickly, they didn't let Xiao Dao or the other saints fight the magical beasts. Instead, the class 1 magical beasts were given to the great saints to kill. As the group continued to walk into the forest, the terrain grew more and more nasty as swamps greeted their eyes in every direction. All sorts of toxic plants and insects also came into their field of view, and sometimes a man-eating magical beast would come out of nowhere. On the road, everyone was very attentive to their surroundings. While listening to the sounds underneath their feet, they were also cautiously looking around themselves. At this point, a few Class 2 magical beasts had attacked them, but they continued onward. The amount of Class 1 magical beasts began to lessen while they encountered a Class 2 magical beast every so often. At that moment, the leading Jian Chen's ears twitched, and then he suddenly stopped in his tracks, raising a hand to signal the flame mercenaries behind him to stop as well. Seeing Jian Chen's movement, everyone in the mercenary group had stopped as well and nervously looked carefully at their surroundings. Although Jian Chen had repeated time after time that as long as 3 Class 3 magical beasts didn't attack them at the same time, then they would be in no danger at all, everyone was still extremely nervous. After all, they were up against a Class 3 magical beast this time instead of the normal Class 2 magical beasts. Although there was only one class apart from each other, the difference in strength between a Class 2 and a Class 3 magical beast was vast. At that moment, the cry of a wild beast rang out from ahead of them. The grass around them violently swayed as a great, 2-meter-tall magical beast appeared in the people's line of vision. This magical beast looked like a wild boar. It had a long nose, and the only thing different from a wild boar was the fact that it had fierce, inch-long snow-white teeth protruding from the corners of its mouth. It also had a single horn sprouting from its forehead. Captain Kendall surveyed the magical beast in front of them. His expression turned grave as he said, "Magical horned boar. Jian Chen, be careful. That's a Class 3 magical horned boar." Jian Chen nodded his head as he stared impassively at the magical horned boar. The silver glow of his light wind sword gradually appeared in his right hand as it was enveloped by a hazy glow of light that covered the entire blade. "We'll act as we had originally planned. Let me deal with this magical beast. You guys just keep yourselves safe." As soon as he said this, Jian Chen raised his sword and swiftly charged at the magical horned boar. Chapter 117. Fighting strength that causes others to quake in fear. The flame mercenaries' eyes grew wide as they all watched Jian Chen charge at the magical horned boar alone. Their gazes were all locked onto Jian Chen's figure that appeared neither tall nor sturdy. Everyone wanted to witness exactly how Jian Chen was going to kill the Class 3 magical horned boar. Captain Kendall had a serious expression on his face as he sent a powerful saint force rushing out from his right hand. A wide axe gradually materialized in his hands, which he grasped tightly as his fierce eyes staring unblinkingly at Jian Chen's frail-looking body. As soon as Jian Chen was unable to resist the Class 3 magical beast's attacks, he charged to the front lines without any hesitation to save Jian Chen. Among this group, he was most likely the only person that could contend against the magical horned boar, albeit with difficulty. Jian Chen was like a monster as he whipped up fine winds with his swift charge toward the magical horned boar in front of him. The light wind sword in his hand became a silver glow, as if turning into a slim and spectacular flash of lightning that pierced toward the magical horned boar's throat. Seeing the silver light, the corners of the magical horned boar's eyes flashed with a fierce glow, faintly expressing a dull look of concentration. It gave a low roar, and its heavy body quickly retreated. At the same time, it tried to turn its entire upper body to the side as it attempted to evade Jian Chen's sword coming at its throat. Although the magical horned boar had already tried its hardest to evade, its enormous body was really too cumbersome. In addition,
Speed was originally the magical horned boar's weakness. There was no way it could dodge Jian Chen's blade that was as fast as lightning. Pooh! The light-winged sword pierced deeply into the magical horned boar's throat, instantly severing its life force. Immediately afterward, the magical horned boar's entire body suddenly grew rigid. Its pair of large eyes gradually lost their feeling, and before it could even give a miserable cry, its entire body fell to the ground with a bang. Jian Chen pulled out the bloody sword from the magical horned boar's throat. As he casually moved it, all of the blood on the light-winged sword began to gradually flow downward. It slowly gathered at the point's end, before finally dripping onto the ground, drop by drop. Absorbing the light-winged sword back into his body, Jian Chen revealed a satisfied smile on his face. After he had broke through to become a middle great saint, his fighting strength was far better than when he was a primary great saint. No matter if it was the speed of his light-winged sword was or the strength of the sword qi around, both had become even stronger than before. Right now, killing a Class 3 magical beast was nothing more than a simple task. Looking at the Class 3 magical horned boar lying on the ground, Jian Chen indifferently said, "Captain Kendall, I'll leave this Class 3 magical beast carcass for you to handle." Not a single sound could be heard from behind Jian Chen in response to his words. Sensing that there was something odd, Jian Chen turned around, only to see that all of the flame mercenaries were currently looking at the magical horned boar on the ground blankly with round eyes. All of them had astonished looks of disbelief. Seeing everyone's brilliant expression, Jian Chen shook his head with a bitter smile. To the flame mercenaries, a Class 3 magical beast was something far beyond their strength. They couldn't kill it in one blow, and if they were hit with one blow, then that would be the end for them. To the mercenaries whose strength was weaker than a Class 3 magical beast, this display of strength shocked them to their core. The people were in a shocked daze for quite a while. Captain Kendall was the first to regain his senses. He exhaled deeply to slowly suppress his shock, and he looked at Jian Chen with a complicated look as he said, "Jian Chen, your strength is too abnormal. Even a Class 3 magical beast was utterly unable to stand up against you. You were able to kill it as easy as pie. This is a Class 3 magical beast, you know." Soon afterward, everyone was gradually brought back to their senses as they looked at Jian Chen with a complicated look of shock and disbelief. Chong Ning Feng let loose a long breath of air and said, "AI, your strength is unbelievable. This was a Class 3 magical beast, but I'm having trouble thinking that this was nothing more than a Class 1 magical beast from how well you handled it." Hearing this, everyone simultaneously nodded their heads as Deer said, "Jian Chen, is your strength really at middle great saint? Seeing how easily you killed this Class 3 magical beast, I'm having a hard time believing you're not at the great saint master level yet." Deer looked at Jian Chen with a complex stare mixed in with a look of envy. After all, Jian Chen was much younger than him, so who wouldn't be envious of his strength? Kobolds hesitated for a bit before opening his mouth to say, "Jian Chen, could it be that what you used just now was a high-level battle skill? I was completely unable to tell when exactly your sword had pierced the magical horned boar's throat." "That's right, I didn't see it clearly. Actually, I couldn't even see a hint of a shadow," Hoopa added in an extremely depressed tone. Hearing this, Jian Chen smiled and said, "It can't really be said to be a battle skill. My swordplay is just on the faster side. It was so fast that we couldn't even see it clearly. That speed is a bit too terrifying," Deer said in a low voice. Kendall walked up to the body of the magical horned boar and said, "Okay, let's not talk about this for now. Everyone come help me take care of the body." Soon after, everyone walked up to the body of the magical horned boar as Xiao Dao took out his saint weapon, which was a small dagger. Fiercely cutting into the stomach of the magical horned boar, he attempted to extract the monster core. However, the moment he had stabbed into the boar's stomach, the blade was only capable of making a small finger-sized hole in it. Although the defense of the magical horned boar wasn't all that outstanding, it was still a Class 3 magical beast. Their leathery skin was still well known, so with Xiao Dao's saint-level strength, if he wanted to cut into the stomach of the magical horned boar, he would have to expend a great amount of effort in order to make a larger cut through the skin. Seeing how Xiao Dao could only cut a small finger-sized hole in the stomach of the magical horned boar, Deer shook his head and walked up beside Xiao Dao. "Xiao Dao, let me give it a try." A great amount of saint force was concentrated around his right arm as a two-handed sword appeared in his palm. "The leather skin of this Class 3 magical beast is quite tough. I've learned a lot today." Xiao Dao cursed as he obediently stood aside for Deer. Soon after,
Deer used his two-handed sword to cut open the belly of the boar and then extracting the bloody Class 3 monster core from within. Wiping it clean of blood, he walked up to Jian Chen and Kendall with some hesitation before offering it up to Jian Chen. Brother Jian Chen, this Class 3 magical horned boar was killed by you, so therefore, the monster core should go to you. Not waiting for Deer to finish his sentence, Jian Chen cut him off saying, Uncle Deer, in accordance to the group rules, this monster core should be given to Captain Kendall to decide, and in the end everyone will give their agreement. This probably isn't the best thing to do. Deer looked hesitant. There's nothing wrong with that, Uncle Deer. Bring the monster core to Captain Kendall to decide. Jian Chen said firmly without any room for Deer to argue against. Fine then. Deer had no choice but to hand the monster core over to Captain Kendall. Kendall gazed deeply at Jian Chen, but did not shirk away. Instead, he reached his hand out to accept the Class 3 monster core and said, In that case, I'll take care of this monster core for now. Once we leave Magical Beast Mountain Range, I'll distribute all the profits based on contribution. Afterward, the group of people allocated one person's space belt to store the magical horned boar's carcass, and then they continued their journey. A Class 3 magical beast's body could be sold for quite a bit of money, so the flame mercenaries obviously wouldn't let this opportunity slip past them. Time quickly passed. Unknowingly, the group had already stayed in the Magical Beast Mountain Range for 10 days. These 10 days were definitely the happiest and most enjoyable moments for the flame mercenaries. That was because during this period, aside from the first day, the remaining days were filled with Jian Chen taking the lead to hunt Class 3 magical beasts in the mountain range. Because Jian Chen's actual combat strength had long surpassed a Saint Master's, he had absolutely no difficulty killing the Class 3 magical beasts. Moreover, ever since his strength had reached the mid-Great Saint level, Jian Chen hadn't once received an injury from fighting a Class 3 magical beast at close range. During this period of time, the flame mercenaries had long since stopped wondering about how strange the powerful strength Jian Chen displayed was. As Jian Chen revealed more and more of his strength, his position in the flame mercenary group continued to rise. Right now, almost everyone, including Captain Kendall, either held extreme respect for him, or was incomparably polite. This was because in 10 days, Jian Chen had brought about a great amount of profit for the flame mercenaries. In these past few days, Jian Chen had killed over 100 Class 3 magical beasts by himself and 300 Class 2 magical beasts, while the flame mercenaries did not kill as many by themselves. They had simply stood behind Jian Chen as he killed the magical beasts and extracted the monster cores from the magical beasts' corpses. Despite this, no one in the group had complained about the unfairness. Instead, they thought of this to be quite joyful. To them, this was as simple as picking up money. By nightfall, the full moon was suspended overhead in the night sky and illuminated the land below in its white glow. Within one of the larger areas of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, a large bonfire lit up the night as the embers from the fire flickered and danced into the sky. 10 people wearing the fur of magical beasts sat around the bonfire. These relaxed figures were the flame mercenaries. These past days we have harvested 125 Class 3 monster cores, 364 Class 2 monster cores, and not even 30 Class 1 monster cores. Other than that, we also have a few Class 3 magical beast corpses. Kendall proclaimed as he examined the items the group had taken. Hearing Kendall's exclamation, everyone let loose an extremely happy smile. Because of this type of harvest, everyone was extremely satisfied. However, everyone knew that if they didn't have the help of Jian Chen, they wouldn't even have a single Class 3 monster core. After all, killing one Class 3 magical beast was already too difficult for them, and killing even half the amount of Class 2 magical beasts would have been impossible to do by themselves. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.